Rudram. Let's just meditate on Lord Shiva first, pray for his blessings, and plunge into this discussion. From the Pashupati Ashtakam, this meditation mantra on Lord Shiva. Om Dhyaye Nityam Mahesham Rajata Girinibham Charu Chandravatang Ratna Kalpojvalangam Parashumurgavarabhiti Hastam Prasannam Padmasinam Samantat Stutam Amaraganairvagakityam Vasanam Vishwadyam Vishwabijam Nikhila Bhayaharam Panchavaktram Trinetram. Oh, I meditate eternally on that great Lord who shines like a mountain of silver, adorned with a crescent moon. His various limbs shine as if adorned with many ornaments. He is holding in his upper left hand an axe that severs all illusion. In his lower left hand, he is holding a deer, symbolizing the conquest of the skittish mind. He assures fearlessness with the mudra of his upper right hand, and with his lower right hand, he offers boons. I meditate upon that Lord Shiva who is established in the deepest samadhi, seated in the lotus posture, mounted atop the lotus of my heart. All about him are gods and other beings, praising and hymning him. He is the ground upon which the universe rests, Vishvadi, and he is the bija, the seed from which the universe springs forth. He is the Nikhila Bhayaharam, that pure shining light which destroys all fear. I meditate upon that five-faced, three-eyed Lord. Om Karpura Gauram Karunavataram Samsara Saram Bhujagendraharam Sadavasantam Hridayaravinде Bhavam Bhavani Sahitam Namami Kailasa Pirtasana Madhya Sangstam Bhaktaischa Nandyadhivisevyamanam Bhaktarti Davanalaam Aprameyam Dhyaye Dhumalingita Vishwarupam Dhyaye Dhumalingita Vishwarupam. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Tat Sat. I meditate upon that Shiva who is like a shining flame of camphor. I meditate upon him who is the incarnation of compassion, who is always present in the lotus of my heart. He is inseparable from his consort Bhavani. I meditate upon him who is absorbed in meditation in the center of the Himalayan mountain range, atop the peak of Kailasa. He is attended to by Nandi, Bringhi, and various other attendants. I meditate upon that lingam which is in the form of this entire universe. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Peace, peace, peace. Hari Om Tat Sat. Tat Purushaya Vidmahe Mahadevaya Dhimahi Tanno Rudra Prachodayat. Om Namo Bhagavate Rudraya. May that Lord Shiva illumine my mind. So, happy Shravan Mas. It's the holy month of Lord Shiva, Śrāvana, and it's the first Monday of Śrāvana according to the Amanta calendar. So what that means is, it's a particularly good time to talk about Shiva and to talk about Tantra, and because Lord Shiva's grace is especially flowing in this period, I thought we should talk about something immensely practical. So the main purpose of tonight's discussion is about doing sadhana. It's about applying yourself in spiritual life in order to see tangible transformation. That's the point of spirituality, to purify the bhutas, bhuta shuddhi it's called, to go from the mundane, the gross, the limited, to that divine, to that unlimited, and to that reality which is recognized to also be present in the mundane and the seemingly limited. So one transcends the world only to discover that the world is itself the transcendent divine, made immanent, shining forth in this and in that. So all of this is nothing but the blazing forth of God. Of course, it's one thing to know that. It's another thing to live according to that. It's one thing to have $1 bajillion in your bank account. It's quite another thing to go there and withdraw the money and spend the money and enjoy that money. So arguably, the point of sadhana is to cash in on your theoretical philosophical understanding. In fact, theoretical and philosophical understanding is very important to get started with sadhana. Sadhana means something like perfecting or cooking or preparing, but of course it colloquially means spiritual practice. Now, there are many, 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 many spiritual practices, and we won't even know which ones to do or which ones would be worthwhile for us unless we have some idea about what's worth gaining, what's worth giving up. Abhinava Gupta calls this Heyopadeya Nishchaya. Nishchaya means a cognition of that which is to be heya, given up, or upadesha, taken in. Heya upadesha nishchaya, what should be given up and what should be received. That knowledge is presupposed actually before we come to spiritual life. So the Buddha, Shakyamuni Buddha, he called it samyak drishti. So we have to have the right view. And in other words, we have to know where we're going in one sense. Although we can't really know where we're going since the ultimate is beyond the mind's ability to comprehend it. But we have to have some sense of where we're going and why we intend to get there before we can even set our feet on the path. So, that being said, today is about walking the path and specifically walking the path according to the Shaiva Shakta Tantras. Like, what does it look like to practice in the context of this tradition? And what do you get out of it? Like, what is this tradition's vision of enlightenment? Mukti, it's called. And there, you'll notice many different models of mukti. There's actually a text, called the Paramoksha Nirnaya. Actually, no, there's a text called the Moksha Karika, which is the text par excellence by one of the great Shaiva commentators on this topic. So this topic on moksha, like what exactly is it? So the moksha karikas are stanzas on liberation. And not only that, the same author has also authored another text called the Paramoksha Nirnaya, which is an examination of other schools' concepts of liberation. And like comparing different models of what freedom looks like according to different traditions. And like figuring out what kind of freedom you're interested in will determine to a large extent what kind of tradition you gravitate towards and what kind of practices you do from within that tradition. So even if you find yourself situated in the Shaiva Shakta world, that's a pretty vast world actually. And there are definitely like differences between schools even within the tradition. So in the Paramoksha Nirnaya, like there you see the same author who composed the Moksha Karika, like comparing different models of liberation from within the Shaiva worldview. So comparing like the Utpatti model to the Sankranti model to like all these different models of liberation. So that's something worth knowing about. It's worth like understanding what liberation looks like, Jaima, before we begin a path. But then not only that, we have to know something about the path itself. Of course, about its pitfalls, its obstacles, so that we can prepare ahead of time for those things. But we have to know basically what it means to walk that path. What is the day-to-day? What does it mean for us to put one foot forward and then the next foot forward? This is actually the purpose of the Guru in Diksha. Like the whole point of Diksha is to give you a philosophical orientation and more importantly, to give you a practice that can help you actualize that philosophical orientation. So Diksha, that process by which initiation is given, that process by which a person is brought into a living lineage, is really, I think, at its core, the transference of power. Obviously, it's the transmission of that ineffable, invisible, yet very tangible quality, which Swami Vivekananda called the quickening impulse. Of course, that is what Diksha is at its heart. The quickening impulse, life giving itself unto other life. Like it's too subtle for words, obviously, this Shakti, this transmission. But in effect, like operationally, Diksha is when you receive a sadhana, when you receive a day-to-day routine or practice that you can consistently and more importantly, reliably do in order not only to immerse yourself in a particular philosophical orientation, but more importantly, to like actualize it. Like I said earlier, to cash in on it, to learn to live according to it and to enjoy it. So part of today's lecture will of course be in providing, we'll be interested in providing that orientation that's necessary for sadhana. But mainly I want to talk about sadhana, the way the tradition conceives of it. And I'm going to use one verse, just one verse for this. I think it's an absolutely stunning verse. And in this verse, everything that you need to know about sadhana, including the mantra which you are to use in sadhana, is provided. How beautiful. Like all the prerequisites for spiritual practice are mentioned. Some of maybe the obstacles and the pitfalls are implied. But more importantly, the means, the direct means which we can apply, they are given. They are provided in the form of a mantra. And of course, the mantra, as per this verse in this text that I'm going to introduce you to shortly, is called the Pañcākshari or the Pañcākshara mantra, meaning the 5-syllable mantra. Now, not so fast. You might have an idea as to what that is, but there are actually different versions of this. There are at least 3 versions of the Pañcākshari mantra that we find across the board in the various traditional sources. There could be innumerable versions of the Pañcākshari. And of course, there's one very popular version of the Pañcākshari, which we'll mainly spend our time focusing on. But the other 2 are worth mentioning also and worth exploring. All 3 of them can be good for sadhana. Any one of them will lead to the highest goal. So you can choose of these 3 which ones you like the most, and you can apply them. Of course, we'll talk about Diksha, of course, and like we'll talk about the context in which this mantra is given in Diksha, and then how that can activate and potentize the mantra. But even short of that, it's perfectly fine for one to practice the mantra because Lord Shiva has already revealed it in the text that we'll study today. So that's what I want to do. And mostly because we've been talking about very lofty philosophical things for quite some time now. So you might have noticed every summer there's like a theme. Actually, to be fair, there's almost always a theme. Every few months, the lectures will often revolve around a particular thing, a particular motif, if you will. Last summer, the theme was all about getting started in spiritual life. It was all about sadhana, it was all about practice. And my assumption was many people, might have more time in the summer. Maybe they're not working, they're school teachers or something and there's summer break, or maybe they take time out of work in order to have a month or two to themselves or a week or two to themselves. Like it's probably the case that people are on vacation, those who are in the northern hemisphere for whom it is now summer. And even those in the southern hemisphere for whom it is winter, usually this period can be a period of going inward, a period of like consolidating your spiritual practice. After all, it's so dark outside at this time of year in the southern hemisphere. So you might want to stay in. And if you're going to be staying in, you might want to sit in front of your altar and you might wonder, what should I do? And if you're in the northern hemisphere and it's bright and sunny, you might be by large bodies of water, you might be in nature, you might be on a vacation. You might have time to really invest in sadhana. So I thought last year in 2024, over the course of the summer talks, we would talk about sadhana. And so all those talks we've compiled in a playlist called How to Practice Spirituality. And there we explore some of the foundational like principles, if you will, or tenets of sadhana, like the goal, the path, gurus, diksha, various different types of yogas like karma yoga, raja yoga, bhakti yoga, jnana yoga. We took a kind of bird's eye view at spiritual practice in general. And not only that, our discussion was very comparative. So we looked at other traditions too, like the Christian tradition. And we talked about the use of the Hail Mary mantra in the Catholic context. And we mostly talked about the use of the Jesus mantra in the Eastern Orthodox context, because that one mirrors very closely the japa ethos that you find in the Sanatana Dharma context. So we talked about Buddhism, Sanatana Dharma traditions. We talked about Islam and the use of zikir type mantras. Like, Sufis will recite a particular mantra that they get from their gurus, actually, from their effendis in the context of their Jarahis might practice a certain way, Mevlevis might practice another way, but they all use mantras, they use dance, they use music, they use ritual, they use pranayama, they use various meditative techniques, but mainly they use mantra. So we were talking about mantra sadhana in a Christian context, in a Muslim context, in a Buddhist context, but of course mainly in the context of Hindu Tantra. So there we took a sort of bird's eye view or overarching general kind of view. Now I want to be more specific. I want to talk about sadhana specifically in a tantric context, but specifically in the context of Shaiva Shakta Tantra, using as our instruction manual a Shaiva Shakta Tantra, namely the Shiva Jnana Bodha, which is the philosophical section of the Raurava Agama. So let me just like back up a little bit and explain all those words that I just threw at you. Let's start with this. I want to talk about tantric spiritual practice, tantric sadhana, and specifically the use of tantric mantras in a tantric context for tantric ends. So you have to take a step back and ask, well, what the fuck is tantra? Tantra, because a tantric practice is based on the tantras. But what is tantra? Because that word is often maligned or misunderstood, and that's part of Ma's play also. But often when we hear the word tantra, we think of a series of practices that might not actually have their origin in the compendium of text known as the tantras. So sometimes practices are presented as tantric, and they might even have a sort of tantric orientation or ethos, but you don't find them anywhere in the tantras. And if you were to ask those teachers where those practices come from, they would say, oh, from our teachers. And if you were to ask those teachers where those practices came from, they'll say, oh, maybe from our teachers. And like that, no one, I think, means anything bad by it. No one is intentionally offering idiosyncratic practices. Many of these practices might have been discovered by modern rishis and whatnot, but you don't find them sometimes in the text. And that being said, can they be called tantric? Well, maybe in one sense, in the sense of their ethos and orientation and whatnot. It might very powerfully work for some people. So not to put these practices down at all just because they don't appear in some book from the 5th or 6th or 7th century AD. But generally, when we say a tantric practice is tantric, we're saying that it appears in the tantras. And when we talk about the tantras, we have to understand that there's a big range of tantras, and they are texts. Each tantra is ideally a complete text of spiritual practice, worship, and philosophy. And you only really need to work with one tantra, because each tantra styles itself as a complete program for spiritual evolution. So in the Tantra, whichever Tantra, you're likely to find four things. So generally, a Tantra is structured in this way. You're likely to find some kind of philosophical orientation. This is called the Jnana Pada. Then you're likely to find some kind of yogic or mantric practice. This is called the Yoga Pada. Then you're likely to find some kind of ritual specifications, like how you're supposed to perform homa, fire ceremonies, or how you're supposed to worship at an altar, or even how you're supposed to construct a temple. Architectural sort of what you call like Vastu Shastra things are almost discussed in some of these things. And of course, importantly, how you are supposed to conduct yourself in the world. This is called the Charya Pada. So these four things: philosophy, some kind of esoteric spiritual practice, some kind of ritual practice or some kind of action to be performed, maybe like building a temple, worshipping in that temple, etc. And also like rules and regulations and things that help you live your life in a way that supports your spiritual growth. So these four things can be expected in a Tantra, and ideally a complete Tantra. And obviously, a lot of these are available now in incomplete forms. We've, of course, over the course of the last however many hundreds of years, lost huge sections of tantras, and sometimes tantras come down to us in a sort of incomplete way. Take, for instance, the Karpuradi Stotram. It contextualizes itself in the Rudra Yamala Tantra, but we don't really have access to that Tantra. Or take, for instance, the Devya Yamala Tantra. We don't have that Tantra. Stuff like that, you know. So there are tantras that are cited, that have sections maybe that have been preserved because they've been copied or cited in other tantras or in some like exegetical commentarial works, but those tantras themselves are lost. Fortunately for us, though, a lot of exegetical commentarial work is done, preserving vast swaths of tantras that are hitherto lost to us. And also, we're doubly fortunate because some tantras have survived in their entirety, dutifully transcribed and commented upon and dutifully handed down from teacher to teacher to teacher. And with a remarkable degree of felicity. As you can see in the Vedic tradition, these chants, they remain the same even over the course of thousands and thousands of years. And there are checks and balances built into the transference of these texts that ensure that they don't get corrupted over time, like in a game of Tāntrik or Vedic broken telephone or something like that, you know. But we can, I think to a large extent, interact with these texts in an especially dependable way in these days because of all the scholarship that's done on them. But the tantras themselves, and this is the most important thing to stress, are texts that tell us how to worship God, how to worship, how to practice, how to meditate, and how to realize. So that's what a tantra is. Now, there are many, many different kinds of tantras, and sometimes the tantras will contradict other tantras. So a tantric tradition might decide for itself which tantras are authoritative and which tantras aren't. So take the Bible, for instance. The Bible is a syncretic document. It's like a combination of many different documents. There's the Old Testament, of course, which is a combination of many, many, many different types of literature. And then there's the New Testament, which is also a combination of many, many different types of works that are all independent works that are brought together in a cohesive structure called the Bible. Now, that happened because a group of people sat around the table and made an executive decision as to which books were canon and which books weren't. You know, so certain books didn't make the cut, like the Gospel of Mary of Magdala, or the Gospel of Philip, or the Gospel of Thomas. And you know, some of these books resurfaced later, like the Qumran War Scrolls or something like that. So like there's the whole Nag Hammadi Dead Sea Scroll kind of thing where, because of recent archaeological evidence, it's quite clear that there are many, many, many traditions within what we call Christianity. Some of them have died out in the Levant, and some of their texts have survived. But it's clear that those texts didn't make it into the Bible. And it's clear that some of those traditions also didn't make it into the modern era. So what we understand of Christianity is based on some editorial project that Constantine conducted, of course. And that's perfectly fine. Like, I think it's perfectly fine for a group to decide what texts are important to them. Maybe it's not okay then to use that book to bludgeon other people who don't agree, but it's up to this at least perfectly fine for a group to say we orient ourselves based on the teachings in these texts and not necessarily based on the teachings in those texts. And by the way, if you were to just accept all the texts, you might get very confused because sometimes these texts contradict one another, and if the contradictions are so blatant and so irreconcilable, then maybe the only thing to do is to jettison out of your tradition that problematic text that is fucking shit up for you in like the other parts of your belief structure and your institution. So it makes sense then that a religious tradition will select for itself what text to follow and what text not to follow. Yeah, so the first thing to point out then is that there are different tantric communities that recognize different tantras as authoritative. So for instance, the Shaiva Siddhanta tradition is one of the most important traditions to talk about because the text that I'm going to introduce today is a Shaiva Siddhanta text. It's called the Rauravagama. And it's one of the tantras that the Shaiva Siddhanta, this foundational dualistic tantric tradition, which arguably is the foundation for all the other tantric traditions that will come after. It's arguably the case that this tradition is the foundation for it all. And they accepted about 28 tantras. 10 of those are very dualistic, and the other 18 are qualified non-dualism. And so those terms aren't that important right now. But basically, there are 18 texts and 10 texts that were brought together as like the canon, as the core literature of this very beautiful, very robust, and very alive exegetical, commentarial, and spiritual tradition known as Shaiva Siddhanta. Now, Siddhanta means the final conclusion or the perfection. Anta means the end. Siddha means something like perfect. So Siddhanta means the orthodoxy, maybe the orthodox doctrine. So this is called Shaiva orthodoxy, but I guess it's better to call this Tantric orthodoxy, orthodox tantra. These are the 28 or so tantras, like the Mrigendra Agama, like the Raurava Agama, like that. So these are Shaiva Siddhanta texts. Also in Kashmir, there's a Swachanda Bhairava Tantra, which despite its name is actually more of a Shaiva Siddhanta text than a non-dual text. So the Shaiva Siddhantins, they are very ritualistically oriented, and they are the ones that maybe provide most of the language and the terminology and the practices and the rituals and whatnot that we today consider Tantra. Okay, so the reason it's called Shaiva Siddhanta, though, and this is another point that we ought to make, is because many of these tantras, if not almost all of them in the early period, were attributed to Lord Shiva. So, as many scholars have pointed out, Tantra as a tradition emerges from within the exoteric movement called Shaivism. And so we'll say a few things about Shaivism in just a few moments. But the reason why this is called the Shaiva Siddhanta is because this tradition is premising its practices and its philosophical orientation on a set of texts that are all said to be the direct revelation of Mahadeva, of Maheshwara, Lord Shiva. So therefore, instead of calling it Tāntrik Siddhanta or Tantra Siddhanta, it calls itself the Shaiva Siddhanta or just the Siddhanta. You know, if you want to be cool, if you want to be an insider, you wouldn't call it the Shaiva Siddhanta. You'll just say the Siddhanta. Because it's assumed that it's the Shaiva Siddhanta. So you just say it's the doctrine or the orthodox. And of course, I have a particular loyalty to the Shaiva Siddhanta, naturally. Almost every Shaiva will. But my loyalty to the Shaiva Siddhanta is twofold. One, obviously because I was born into the Shaiva Siddhanta. Actually, it's threefold. One, I was born into the Shaiva Siddhanta and I received almost all of my abhishekams and consecrations in the context of Shaiva Siddhanta. Secondly, because I love my guru, my grandfather, who is a Shaiva Siddhantin, who taught me exclusively Shaiva Siddhanta, but then allowed me to explore all the other texts within our tradition also, which weren't very important to him. So he was very liberal. As a Shaiva Siddhanta teacher, he was very encouraging of me studying like non-dual texts from Abhinavagupta, Kshemaraja, etc. Like, so he encouraged me to explore the more Shakta dimensions of our tradition and whatnot. And of course, my mother's side of the family are all Shaktas. So that was there, like that kind of Amman, cult of Amman sort of thing was there. So he allowed me to like explore all of those things. But the fact that my guru is a Shaiva Siddhantin also means that I have a certain loyalty to the tradition and to its texts. But the third reason why I have a loyalty to Shaiva Siddhanta is because the texts are awesome. And I think they can be understood along the lines of my more non-dual proclivities. So one can comment upon these texts in a dualistic way, arguing for the eternal verities of God, world, and soul. Shiva, or Pati, Pasha, and Pashu. Shiva, Jagat, and Jiva. Like one can argue that these three are forever distinct, real entities. Or one could take the same text and see in it a slightly more qualified non-dual claim that these three are parts of a whole, that Shiva, the world, and individual souls are all part of one cohesive reality. Or, as I like to do, as I tend to do, you can take it in a more non-dual direction. And you can say that only one reality exists. It's Shiva. The world is a blazing forth of Shiva, reposing in his own infinite bliss, endowed with powers of willing, knowing, and doing. And Tattvamasi Shvetaketu. And that's what you are. So that's, of course, my favorite interpretation. But all three interpretations are valid in Shaivism. So this brings me to another point. What does Lord Shiva reveal? Lord Shiva, the thing is, doesn't just reveal one thing. He seems to reveal a bunch of different things. For instance, he reveals 10 texts 10 tantras that are dualistic. And in these texts, Lord Shiva says, the jiva, the individual soul, is distinct from God, and God is distinct from the world. So in the philosophical language of Shaiva Siddhanta, Shiva, who is after all one with Shakti, is the efficient cause only, but the world, Pasha, is the material cause, and never the twain shall meet. Like Shiva is not the material cause. Shiva doesn't literally become the world. The world is the world, composed of Nada and Bindu, and Lord Shiva, the creator, maintainer, destroyer, revealer, and concealer, pervades that world with his power and like creates things and sculpts things and allows individual souls to play out their karmas. And those individual souls are really actually individual. They're not one with each other, they're not one with Shiva, they're not one with the world. They're all discrete points of light, if you will, that are each on their journey of getting closer and closer to Shiva until they realize their Shiva nature. But once they realize their Shiva nature, they don't become Shiva, they become like Shiva. So it's as if Shiva will just continue being Shiva, and then when you realize that you're Shiva, you'll just hang out with Shiva as Shiva, but you're still different from him. So there are texts like this, and these are dualistic texts that argue that God and soul and world are all three of them different from one another. Then, stunningly, Lord Shiva reveals another 18 texts that are different. In these 18 texts, he says, no, it's not that the souls and the world and God are all different. They're distinct but not different. They're distinct parts of some greater whole. So now some unity is being pointed out here. Some underlying oneness is being indicated. So then you might say, but wait, what about those 10 texts in which Lord Shiva very emphatically declares these three to be different principles? Now he's just turning around and saying something else, that actually there's like a deeper reality beyond them all. And then what about the 64 Bhairava Agamas? This is where it gets really interesting. In these texts, we start leaning towards goddess worship. And not only that, in these texts, we start offering things that would be unthinkable to the practitioners of the previous like 28 texts. You know, like now we start offering things like wine and meat and fish, and we start having sex in the context of ritual worship. All those things that are expressly forbidden in the context of the first 28 texts. So why would Lord Shiva forbid something in one place and then enjoin it in another? Isn't that really confusing? Lord Shiva, God, tells one person to do X, and then he tells another person to do Y, and X and Y are polar opposites. He says to that first person, if you drink wine, you will boil in Naraka. And to the other person, if you don't offer wine to the goddess, you will boil in Naraka. And you're like, what's my stance on wine? You have to remember, like, nowadays it's not such a hot question because, like, wine, what of it? You know, it's just a Tuesday night in Los Angeles. But if you're a Brahmana, like, very much attached to your idea of purity, even the smell of wine would be an offense to you, because then you would have to go and take a ritual bath. You might have to get reinitiated if you were to accidentally taste a bit of wine because of how impure it is. And now the text is telling you to not only smell the wine, but offer it to God, God who is the source of all purity, and then to consume it afterward. God forbid, right? Because God did forbid in those texts. And then here, God is changing the story. So that can be very confusing. And the 64 Bhairava Agamas have a more like non-dual leaning. So they argue that like, it's not that these three, Shiva, world, and souls, are parts of a whole. There is only the whole. There is only one reality, and you are it. So in the first 10 agamas, you might get this impression, I am the eternal devotee of Lord Shiva. In the next 18 agamas, you might get the sense that I am a part of Lord Shiva. I'm not Lord Shiva, like Shiva is Shiva, but I'm a part of Lord Shiva. I'm not different from Lord Shiva. I'm not separate from him. I'm a part of him. But in these 64 texts, you get a very different picture. Here, you will say, drunk with divine ecstasy and probably also grain spirits, you might say, I am Shiva. Shivoham, Shivoham. I am Kali. There is only Kali. Everything is Kali. There is no impurity. Oh Mother, there is nothing so transcendent that thou hast not transcended. And oh Mother, there is nothing so pure, impure, like a corpse or offal, that thou hast not permeated fully. Give me it. I'll touch it with my tongue and prove it to you that this is God through and through. So you get that bhava. You know, a bhava of identifying with God in a one-to-one relationship, which would of course be blasphemy in a more like dualistic context. So these three texts are revealed, right? All three of them are attributed to Lord Shiva. All three types of revelations are attributed to Lord Shiva. So Lord Shiva gives three distinct types, if you will, of tantras. 10 dualistic tantras, 18 qualified non-dualistic tantras, and 64 dualistic tantras. Non-dualistic tantras. Give this like 91 or 92 or something, different tantras. So when we talk about the tantras, now in actuality, there are like infinite tantras. There are like so many of them, and many of them are not, of course, not in Sanskrit, and that's perfectly okay. Like I grew up studying tantras in Tamil, like the Tirumantiram, for instance. Like my first tantras, like baby's first steps, if you will, were all exclusively in Tamil. In fact, the text that I'm going to talk to you about now, today, was first introduced to me in Tamil, and only later I encountered its Sanskrit equivalent. So there are many, many tantras that are not in Sanskrit. They might be in Grantha script or Sarada script. So even if they are in Sanskrit, they're not in that Hindi style like Devanagari script that you might be familiar with. There are regional scripts, like in Kashmir, you're more likely to encounter Sarada, and in Malayalam places like in Kerala, you're more likely to encounter Grantha like that. So there are different scripts, there are different languages, and of course, new tantras are being created all the time, which might sound confusing to you because after all, aren't these the revelations of God? Yeah, well, it turns out that God does speak through humans. And so humans possessed by Shiva can of course offer new tantras. So tantras are emerging all the time. We can't limit or freeze the tradition to these 92 or 91 or 92 tantras. So I think to be very fair, there are infinite tantras available all over the world, and they're all attributed to Shiva or to Devi. Functionally, that means the same thing. But 92 of them are recognized as, I guess you could say, like canon. And then within these 92, different canons are created by different communities. So the Shaiva Siddhanta will accept 28, like I was saying earlier, and reject 64. They will reject those tantras that say, I am Shiva. They'll reject the tantras that tell us to worship with wine. For example, I was giving you an example last week from the Tirumantiram. So there, Tirumular, the great Siddhar, says in verse 326, I think, all the way through to 336 in his first tantra, he says there, don't drink wine. It's terrible. Those who drink wine will like fall off from the path of Shiva. They're deluded by false teachings. Like it's better to drink the wine of samadhi. Like you should have the Shivananda wine. You know, drink this wine, not that wine. Like the reason why Tirumular has to come down so hard on wine drinking for like 10 verses at the end of his tantra number 1, the Charya Pada of that tantra, is probably because he's in dialogue with other traditions whose tantras tell them to do that. So here's a clear example of a Shaiva community deciding what text to follow and omitting those texts that contradict their text. And the opposite is true for those people on the other end of the spectrum. So they might accept their text, but maybe reject those texts. But they're less likely to, you know. One thing we also notice is that those who are more on the left, like Kaulas and Vamacharis and whatnot, who accept those more transgressive tantras, probably they will also accept those other tantras. It's a kind of interesting thing to point out. Not always. Sometimes they'll say, oh, those mantras are powerless. You have to get the mantra from Devi. It's only Shakti mantras that will do it for you. These Shaiva Siddhanta mantras, no virya, no mantra chaitanya. Nothing will happen if you chant them. So you get claims like that. And of course, you get hierarchical claims. So even if these traditions accept those tantras, it's usually in a kind of hierarchical or religiously inclusivist kind of way. So for example, the way I've been presenting things so far might give you the impression of a kind of chronology, as if the 10 dualistic ones come first, then the 18 non-dualistic ones come after that, and then the properly non-dual ones, the 64 Bhairava Agamas, come after that. And this might make sense to you because it seems like we're moving towards oneness. We start with the idea that there are 3 separate categories, which is a very common sense view. From there, we start to intuit the presence of some underlying whole, some reconciling reality, and then we realize that the whole is all there is. There is only one. So doesn't this sound like a sort of journey, as it were? Like we go from the dualism to the qualified non-dualism and finally to non-dualism? So that's a nice way to think about it. And many people think about it in this way. Even Swami Vivekananda, for a time, thought about the world's religions in this way. But notice, there's a danger here. It's still a hierarchy. It still privileges non-duality. Like it's something that a non-dualist would say, right? Like most of us in this room, we're non-dualist. We're loyal to all the tantras, but particularly to those Bhairava Agamas. So we would like to say probably that like, oh, we'll all arrive here one day in non-duality. Like we're at the top of the pyramid, you know. At one point, our soul had to be in a dualistic sort of mode. And then through a lot of spiritual practice and through Shiva's grace and through our own insight and brilliance, we were able to perceive the one beyond the many. And then going from parts to the one, like, here we are. Yay me. Congratulations. We're all non-dualist. So it's sometimes kind of gratifying or maybe sometimes kind of convenient to think of things as a ladder because almost always you'll see the people who are approaching things from a religiously inclusive point of view. And you know, by the way, the word inclusive doesn't mean what it means like in colloquial. It means like hierarchicalizing things. You know, religious exclusivism is the view that I'm right and everyone else is wrong. Religious inclusivism is the view that people are right, but they're not as right as I'm right, and it's kind of a hierarchy of rightness. No one's ultimately wrong, but we all build up upon one another. And usually the people making these kinds of claims will usually, I mean, I would argue almost always, privilege their tradition as being at the top of that hierarchy. So if you're going to make a religious inclusivist claim, you could say it's kind of like a ladder. And there are three rungs of the ladder. Three lungs of the ladder? Okay, that's some good absurdist poetry. But no, three rungs of the ladder. Okay, there's like the dualism rung, there's the qualified non-dualism rung, and then there's a non-dual rung. And then you go, you leave one behind, you go and you go and you realize God. But you know, the thing about a ladder, as one commentator pointed out, is that you can flip it around and use it the other way too. So a hierarchy can work both ways. It all depends on how you want to look at it. You could say a tradition is better for being first, or you could say a tradition is better for being later, more up to date, more modern. So Judaism might say we're the best because we were here first, whereas Islam might say we're the best because we're the latest, most modern. Like we're the new iPhone, you guys. What are you doing with an iPhone 7? Like it's time for iPhone. Like what is it now? Like 15, 16? I don't know. Like some people claim their traditions are better based on newness, and yet others claim their tradition is better based on oldness, as it were. Some traditions base their claim on being foundational, whereas other traditions build their claim on being uttara, or what do you say in English? Supreme, you know? So how do you argue for better or for worse? You can't. And it might sound like these are all sequential revelations. And if they are sequential, then you can make claims about which one came first, which one came after, which rung is higher than which other rung on the ladder. You can make all of these claims, except that it probably wasn't that way. I mean, I don't know how it was in his historicity, but at least in legend, Lord Shiva reveals all these three at the same time. That's remarkable, isn't it? He reveals three truths that are maybe contradicting one another in these 90 or so agamas, all at once. And the legend is he reveals it to Durvasas, a great sage at the top of Mount Kailasa. So Lord Shiva, he comes in this avatara form. Not really, but he comes as a guru called Sri Kanta, the blessed throat one. And he comes and he teaches these 92 agamas to Durvasas, who then teaches it to three other people. He gives the 10 dualistic agamas to Amardaka, he gives the 18 qualified non-dualistic ones to Srinatha, and he gives the 64, no, sorry, the qualified non-dualistic ones, yeah, Srinatha, and the 64 Bhairava agamas, the non-dualistic ones to Triambaka. And Triambaka, his lineage ultimately terminates in Somananda. No, it doesn't terminate in Somananda because Somananda has a disciple, Lakshmana Gupta, who has a disciple, Abhinav Gupta. So the lineage continues. But Triambaka is the one who teaches this non-duality. And Triambaka's daughter, known as Ardha Triambaka, she teaches like this Kaula variation of this non-duality. So there seems to be at least four distinct traditions flowing down through time, arriving here and now in our own understanding and practice. So when we say tantras, when we talk about the tantras, we're talking about those practices and those philosophical orientations that come from these texts which have been handed down through these distinct traditions. And at least there are three of them: dualistic, qualified non dualistic, and non dualistic. Of course, the picture is much more complex. Like, obviously, it's not just three, it's innumerable traditions. But what's being handed down throughout these traditions is this tantra. So like that's what we call tantra. The revelation of Lord Shiva, which are 92 or so in number. 10 of them are dualistic, 18 of them are qualified non-dualistic, and 64 of them are properly speaking non-dualistic. And you can take any one of these texts and they're a complete system of spiritual practice. But often we rarely go to the text directly. We often approach a text with some commentarial tradition to help us. So if we're going to look at a dualistic text or a qualified non-dualistic text, we might take the help of like Bhoja Raja or somebody, or Aghora Shiva or somebody. We might take the text and also the commentary on the text by one who has mastered the text. So like that. And if we're going to take the Malini Vijayotaro Tantra, which is of course one of the greatest goddess-oriented non-dual Kaula texts of all time, probably, it's not just the Malini Vijayotaro Tantra that you're going to look at. You're probably going to look at Abhinava Gupta's commentary on the Malini Vijayotaro Tantra, which is called the Tantra Loka. So Tantra Loka, remember, is a commentary on the Malini Vijayotaro Tantra. But what Abhinava Gupta does is brilliant. Yeah, Colleen, that's perfect. There it is. That's actually a good book. That's the Tantra Sara. And let me tell you about Tantra Sara. So Tantra Loka is this huge, like 37 chapter kind of thing. It's like huge, right? But it's based on the Malini Vijayotaro Tantra. And Abhinava Gupta, who is one of the most important names, arguably, in the non-dual Shaiva world, one of our heroes, of course, growing up. We Shaivas who were very attracted to that goddess-oriented kind of non-dual world. Like Abhinava Gupta is like, oh my God, like one of our heroes. He's like our Shankaracharya, I guess you could say. But he not only commented on the Mani Vijarataro Tantra, he like innovated upon it in a sense. Like he was drawing from other tantras too, like the Devya Yamala Tantra, the Jayarata, like different texts. Trishara Bhairava Tantra, like different texts. Some of them don't even exist anymore, but at that time he had access to them and he was drawing from them and he was combining a few different streams, like what is called the Trika, a tradition of non-dual worship, the Krama or the Kali Kula, a tradition oriented around Kali, which of course is kind of our home base. We're more Krama than we are Trika, of course, in this community. But then, of course, he's also drawing from Shaiva Siddhanta and from a very important tradition that was very prevalent where he lived, and that's called Pratyabhigya, whose maybe principal teacher might be Utpala Deva, but I argue it's Somananda. But like, we don't need to debate that right now. But that was very active in Kashmir. So Abhinavagupta inherits in Kashmir these various things. Pratyabhigya, Trika, Kalikula, or Krama, and then he brings them all together in his Tantra Loka. Tantra Loka is a commentary on a Tantra, but it reads as a Tantra unto itself because it gives you philosophy, it gives you mystical yogic practices, it gives you ritualistic practices. Some of those include marriages and funerals, and of course the infamous chapter 29, which is all about the sex ritual. And then it tells you about like codes of conduct. For instance, this ritual should not be given to just anybody, but only the most highly qualified aspirants. Stuff like that. So, Tantra Loka, although it is a commentary on a Tantra, is itself to perhaps be read as a Tantra. But because that Tantra is so difficult, so complex, Abhinavagupta, in his compassion, composes a much shorter text, which Colleen Ma is holding up there. Do you want to show it, Colleen? I actually really love that H.N. Chakravarti edition. So, if you want to read the Tantra Sara, I love this volume because the Sanskrit is there. So you can like look at the Sanskrit, you can read the Devanagari,
Yeah.
but there's also a nice translation, right?
I'm so excited about it. I really am. I couldn't afford all of the books I wanted in my wish list, but this was like the top three. So I was like jacked when I got this one.
Good, good. It's the only one I think that you will need. It's after all the Sara, the essence of Tantra. It's got so many things in there, and honestly, like the first two chapters are just like it's just those two alone are enough to not only give you the view, but for the right kind of person to permanently establish you in that view. And in chapter 2, there are some beautiful verses there where Abhinavagupta says, like, what can practice really do for you? Nothing, actually. He calls them the upaya jala, the net, the web of practices. He's saying the web of practices can't really help you because they can never reveal Shiva, who is pure consciousness. Shiva is the one who reveals those practices, not the practices reveal Shiva. After all, is it the pot that reveals the sun or the sun that reveals the pot? Like that. Is it a practice that reveals consciousness or consciousness that reveals the practice? So Lord Shiva, in the form of Dakshinamurti, in the form of Abhinavagupta, is telling us, like, don't worry about it. You're Shiva. And no amount of practice can ever take that from you or reveal it to you. What, like, is there some veil that you need to pierce in order to recognize that you're Shiva? No, no veil exists apart from Shiva. Is there like some other reality that you need to penetrate into? No, Shiva alone exists. And is there something that you need to like attain? How can you attain what is already you? Stuff like that. So Abhinavagupta takes you this through this kind of Anupaya style teaching, as he calls it, to show you that you don't need practice actually. You're Shiva. You're already free, and all you have to do is recognize that. In fact, the opening words of Tantrasara after his hymn to the Guru and whatnot are Jnana Moksha Karana. Jnana is the cause of liberation. Iha Jnana Moksha Karana, I think. Karana. Iha Jnana Moksha Karana. He's saying liberation, freedom, is caused by knowledge. What kind of knowledge? Knowledge of the form I am Shiva, reposing in infinite bliss, endowed with willing, knowing, and being, which lives in all beings as all beings. I've always been that, always will be that. I am timelessly now that. Realize that and be free. Sukam Jara, Sukam Jara. So that can happen in a flash for the right kind of person. So that's there in the Tantra Sara. And of course, the Tantra Sara is an attempt to essentialize the Tantra Loka, Tantra Aloka, the light on the Tantras, etc., etc. So when we interact with the Tantric tradition, and Anahata Devi, it's so good to see your face today, Jaima, Jaima. When we interact with the Tantra, and let's take some of your questions here, I think. This is a good place to talk about them too. But anyway, when we interact with the Tantric tradition, we're interacting with the Tantras, with the text themselves, but of course we're also interacting with the commentarial tradition around those texts, which help us not only understand those texts, but apply those texts. But the thing you have to understand is that commentary is interpretation. Even translation is interpretation. So when we approach a text, we have to understand what the text actually says. And then it's going to be helpful for us to interact with different commentaries so we can see different ways in which that text can be understood. So, in one sense, we don't want to get locked into some interpretive, commentarial tradition. Because like we should empower ourselves by going direct to what Lord Shiva actually said. Not what we people think he said, but what he actually said. And who knows if the text even represent what he actually said. I don't know. We should ask him. But our belief, our axiom is this: the tantras are revealed by Lord Shiva. And in those primary sources, in those tantras, is a wealth of philosophy, of practice, of suggestions for spiritual living. It's a great treasure, friends. And I think if I do nothing else today, I just want to place before you this treasure trove of spirituality called the Tantras, which for far too long we have only ever really been misunderstanding and appropriating and deriving authority from without ever actually reading. You know, like so many teachers have built their entire careers off of teaching Tantra, but they've never once interacted with a Tantra. And I'm not like, I don't mean to be like, oh, those teachers are not like, no, no, no. I mean, they're great. They're transforming lots of people. It's not wrong. I mean, everyone, Tantra is a living tradition. Like it flows through all of us, etc., etc. All of that's good too. But what a shame to miss out on all that we could learn and all that we could uncover and all that we could use when we don't know that these texts actually exist. And the reason why I like pointing to them is because it keeps us straight. You know, everything that is presented in the spiritual marketplace can be checked and balanced by the tradition. If there isn't a tradition, and if people aren't empowered to access that tradition for themselves, they are always at the mercy of some idiosyncratic teacher claiming the legitimacy of the tantras, which they themselves have never read, and which we cannot like call them out on. You know, because we've never read them either. So what do we know? And what do they know? And like this, people get in droves and scores. All their money just goes away. It's so sad. They spend thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars on teachers and on practices that are not grounded in any tradition or lineage or text. So that could be great. I mean, for some people, that can be really transformative. And that's also a perfectly valid expression of Lord Shiva's infinite expansion. Like we have no problem with it whatsoever. It's worth saying though, that a nice, safe, grounded spirituality is preferable to hacking and slashing. You could, at best, like, waste some time, you know, with that kind of thing, where you're just doing practices that you find off the internet, but you don't know where they're from. And, you know, like a practice that has survived for thousands of years, or at least hundreds of years, or at least like 100 years, is probably better than a practice that somebody made up a year ago and put their name on and is now selling to you for like thousands of dollars. You know, but sometimes there's a kind of fallacy here where we think that just because something is expensive and just because it's being presented as something new, it's therefore better. But it's not vetted, you see. It doesn't have a peer-reviewed system of corroboration, and that's what the tantras offer us. Something peer-reviewed, something corroborated, something vetted, something that is stood the test of time. So I'm always going to say, when it comes to practice, when it comes to spiritual practice, like we're investing so much time and energy, let's get the right view. Samyak drishti. And where will we get our practices? Where will we get our view? Insofar as we want to be tantrikas, insofar as we want to be in the tantric tradition, we should probably go to the tantras direct. And we're lucky. So many of them are available. So the tantra I want to talk to you about tonight, and the practice I want to present to you tonight, comes from this tantra. It's called the Shiva Jnana Bodha, and it appears in the Raurava Agama. And it's available online. Like you can just type in Shiva Jnana Bodha, and then you'll find like all the Sanskrit, all the Devanagari, and I think the Tamil version might be available online too. But I'm just gonna look at one verse. I'm just gonna take one verse without any commentary. Like there's a beautiful commentary by Agora Shiva and many great modern commentators too, like Maheshwaracharya, Saneshwar Timalsinaji also did a very beautiful commentary on this text, and I'm very indebted to that commentary. I studied with him also this particular text, and it was really, really wonderful. It was really, really profound. And so, of course, I just want to acknowledge now that what I say about this text, all the mistakes are solely mine, and whatever is helpful, of course, comes from our teachers. And I'm very indebted to Acharyaji for particularly the study of this text, because I had learned it when I was growing up, and so it's been with me for a very long time. But I just want to acknowledge that there are some great Maheshwaracharyas alive today who are offering living commentaries on these texts, which mean that these texts are alive and these practices are alive. And the practice that we're going to describe is a practice that you probably already know. It's a very popular and common practice, but very deep. Just because it's popular, just because it's common, doesn't mean it's worthless. Everyone wants some kind of like juicy, sexy mantra with like 36 bijas or some shit like that. Nobody wants the thing that actually maybe works. We don't want medicine, we want candy. You know, and that's fine. Candy is good too. But sometimes when we become, yeah, and Rose's like, why not both? And it's true. And sometimes candy is sweet and medicine is bitter. And it's like, I like how what's her name? You know the one like supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. Mary Poppins. Like she's there's this whole scene where the kids have to take some kind of cough syrup or something. Although I think a lot of people very voluntarily take the cough syrup because it's fun. But I think the kids have to take some kind of disgusting medicine. Yeah, and then she like gives them a spoonful of sugar or something like that. So she gives them both. I think a good teacher knows how to make a cocktail. Do you know how to present the alcohol and sneak it through some kind of sugary sweet beverage? So like the cocktail is a delivery system, right? And so like all these traditions can be a kind of delivery system. But sometimes people want the sugar without the medicine. Or people sometimes are willing to take the medicine without the sugar, and that's kind of cool too. Just, you know, like straight, drinking it neat. That's cool too. But here's the thing. We become very serious about spiritual life after a while. Like we want our practices to actually mean something. We're no longer dilettantes. We're no longer spiritual tourists. Like we want to do some practice and we want that practice to actually be transformative. And then we start asking questions like this. What's actually going to help me? And sometimes we find that it's the simple things. And the simple things are often not as commercially viable as the sweeter, sexier, kind of crazier things. Like everybody wants to drink wine or whiskey in the smashan and invoke like the Ashtamatrikas and the Ashtabhairavas. And then they do and they go crazy. Why? Because nobody wants to do these practices that would like make it possible for you to do those practices. And so those who want to approach Kali and who want to approach like a more like Vamachara, like Kaula context, would do well to pay attention to this practice, which we're going to present today. Because arguably, this is the foundational practice of all Shaivism, and everyone benefits from it who wants to approach either God direct through Shaivism or like through a more like Kaula, Marga, Shakta route. Like these can still be very, very helpful practice. And just the ethos of the practice that we get from this verse can be cross-applied, I think, to other Tantric traditions, even Vaishnava Tantric traditions like the Pancharatra and whatnot. So the text we're going to take up now for this class and this study is called the Shiva Jnana Bodha, which means the awakening to the knowledge of Shiva. Actually, the interesting thing about this text, and Acharyaji pointed this out to me first, actually, that Shiva, Jnana, and Bodha are all synonyms. I hadn't noticed that before. I had been reading the title very literally. Shiva, Jnana, Bodha, awakening to the knowledge of Shiva. Okay, that's what the text is going to teach us. What is Shiva and what is it to know Shiva? Okay, that's fair. But then Acharyaji pointed out that actually Shiva means awareness, Jnana means knowledge, and Bodha means awakening, or also awareness. So it's like consciousness, knowledge, awareness. Basically, three synonyms. And notice, these three might be three different principles. Shiva, Pati. This I heard from some other acharyas. But Shiva, Pati, Lord, God. Jnana, which is Shakti, Pasha, and Bodha, the awakened individual, Nara. And these are different, you see. Shiva is God, Jnana is knowledge of God, or the knowledge by which we forget God, also another kind of knowledge, Avidya Maya. And the Bodha, the Buddha, is the awakened one who has knowledge about reality. So these are three categories, and the Shaiva Siddhanta, or the Siddhanta if you want to be cool, argues that these are three different categories. There's Pati, the Lord, there's the world, Pasha, and there are individual souls, Pashus. But when Acharya Tamalsanaji, like just like kind of casually pointed out the three of them are really like one thing, oh, Jai Ma. Good. The sun is just set, so now it's coyote hours. Our powers have increased. So hopefully the lecture will get a bit better now. These are our hours. Okay, so um what did we have? Yeah, so this casual remark that, oh, actually they're synonyms, that's a non-dual claim. Right? You notice just like etymologically, you can look at the words, you can see, oh, there are three different words. But are they? There are three different words, but they're kind of similar. So even the three different words are like parts of a concept. Do you see what's going on here? You can read them as three separate words, or you can read them as three words that all describe a similar concept. So they're three parts of a whole, or you could say they're all three synonyms. Do you see how even in the title of this text, you can get different streams? How beautiful is this tradition that even three words can give you three different doorways into three different universes of philosophy and practice? It's wonderful. So this text is part of a wider text, a larger text called the Raurava Agama. And one of the greatest commentators of the Shaiva tradition, the Shaiva Siddhanta tradition, Sadhyo Jyoti, traces his lineage up to this Raurava Shiva, Shiva in the form of Raurava. So anyway, in this text, there are of course lots of mantras and lots of practices, but in the core of the text, arguably, I think it's the core of the text, there's the Shiva Jnana Bodha, and here we get a practice in verse 9. So that's the verse I want to take you to now. I'll show you the verse. Let me go and find it. So the verse is Chid drishatmani drishtvesham taktya vritti marichikam labdva shiva pada chayam dhyayet panchaksharim sudhihi. So let me just show you the verse now. I'm hoping that you can see it. Do you see this? Yeah, you can see it. Okay. Oh, okay. Is it still here? So this idea, Chid drishat mani. So Chid, this first, oh, this is the verse, by the way. Number 9 here. So verse, yeah, no, this is number 9. Okay, so here's number 9. And then this is the first word in the verse. Chit, consciousness. So Chit drishat mani. And then this is a very beautiful idea. This drishtvesham. So isham, having, and this is the labdva and the tyaktva, like that. These means having done something. So having seen the Lord. This is this word drishtvesham. It's a tongue twister a bit. Drishtvesham. So this word drishtvesham means having seen the Isham, the Lord. And where have you seen the Lord? In the self, Atmani. So having seen the Lord in your very own self, or as yourself, or in the core of your being, through, and this is an instrumental word here, this idea of drishtatmani, through the eyes of, or the vision of consciousness. So chid drishatmani, drishtvesham, having seen the Isha, the Lord, as one's own self, through the eyes of consciousness. Tyaktva means having given up. Tyaktva, having abandoned. Having abandoned vritti marichikam, having abandoned the modifications of the mirage-like mind. The word marichi can mean like rays. So imagine like rays shining, and vritti means like all the holographic, like delusory images that you see within that shining. So the mind is like that. It's marichi upon marichi upon marichi, like ray upon ray upon ray of some scattered, fragmented, distorted reality. These are called vrittis. And of course, those who are studying the Yoga Sutra, you know that in the Yoga Sutra, it says, Yoga Chitta Vritti Nirodham. Like Nirodham means suppression or ending of, and Chitta Vritti means modifications of the mind. So yoga, according to Patanjali, is the complete cessation of all the modifications of the mind. A similar idea is given here. Vrittim Marichikam. Marichikam means the rays of the modifications of the mirage-like mind. So having abandoned those. Tyaktva, having given up the rays of the mirage-like mind, and labdva, having attained, and this is a very technical and important word, Shiva pada chayam. Shiva pada chayam. So I've seen this translated almost as Shiva pada chayam. Pada means foot, but pada means state or step, or even like something like sentence or phrase. So Shiva Pada could mean the state of Shiva. Chaya means shadow of, or shade rather. So having attained the cooling, soothing shade of Lord Shiva's feet, having taken refuge in the shade of the feet of the Guru, or having received the refuge of the state of Shiva. In other words, having received Lord Shiva's grace, usually in the form of Diksha or through a guru. But having received Lord Shiva's grace, now one should, or the wise person, Suddhihi, the wise person should meditate, dhyayet, using the Pañcākshari, or one should meditate on the Pañcākshari rather. So the wise person should meditate on the 5-syllable mantra, having, first of all, seen the Lord as one's own self in consciousness, having renounced or abandoned all the modifications of the mirage-like mind, and having attained the grace of God in the form of a guru. Having done all these 3 things, one should, and if one is wise, one should, Suddhi, the wise one should meditate on the Pañcākshari, the 5-syllable mantra. So this is the verse that gives us the practice, and it gives us the prerequisites for the practice, and also talks a little bit about like pitfalls and traps as to why the practice might not work. And it also gives us some range as to how to understand the practice. So let's just unpack this verse together a little bit, and then we'll see what the practice is. And so at the end of this, we'll of course present the 3 mantras, the 3 different ways to understand the word Pañcākshari, and we'll go through what these 3 prerequisites really mean, or one understanding of what, I mean, I don't want to say what they really mean. They can mean so many different things according to many different interpretations, but what I think they mean. I'm going to conjecture some meanings. And then we'll see if they can be helpful in understanding how to do this practice. Okay, so before I do that, let me just take you way back to the beginning of the lecture. So I was telling you at the beginning that we often do things thematically here. And often in the summer, all the lectures that we offer in the summer, and some of you are in the winter, it's the Southern Hemisphere, I get it. But I'm here in Los Angeles, so it's the summer. And so every summer, we like to do lectures that are all in like a particular theme. So you might have noticed last year the theme was how to practice spirituality, and today's lecture might fit that theme a little bit better. This summer, though, it was like a Somananda summer. Do you know how it's hot girl summer? It's a Somananda summer where like I mainly took the time this summer to talk about what I think is the most radical, uncompromising kind of non-duality offered by the Shaiva Shakta non-dual traditions. The idea that every single thing is not only consciousness, but also conscious. That even the table and the piece of cloth and the AI, like whatever inanimate object that you see in the world, is actually Shiva, endowed with the power of willing, knowing, and doing. So the pot knows that it's a pot. And I don't think Somananda is smoking pot when he says this. He's having a revelation, and the revelation is that Shiva is the pot, and the pot knows itself actually as a pot, and wills to be a pot, and acts as a pot. Like, that's a pretty radical claim. Torelli calls it the extreme formulation. And so we spent most of our time this summer talking about that, right? But it's very heady stuff. I mean, we're talking about the tradition at its like loftiest height. And so that's therefore today on Vinayaka Chaturthi, on the fourth day of the month of Shravan, celebrating Vinayaka, Ganesh. There's Ganesh Chaturthi later, but this Vinayaka Chaturthi, it's all about grounding, you know. And I want to ground all of this, hopefully, all this kind of philosophical discussion in a practice that we can actually do. So that's why this lecture is actually appropriate for last summer. I know what you did last summer. We talked about a lot of practical things. And this summer, we talked a lot about philosophical things, non dual, rarefied, kind of maybe almost bizarre non dual views. And we'll continue doing that, by the way. The summer's not done, and neither am I. I still have more stuff to say about Somananda and more exploration there. But today, I just want to combine these two things. And they can be combined beautifully in this one verse from the Shiva Jnana Bodha and the Raurava Agama. So far, so good. We understand what tantras are. We understand that there are many different tantras, and that some tantras might be authoritative to some communities and other tantras not so much. And I hope you can see that whatever tantra you take up, it's being revealed by Lord Shiva. And he's the one who revealed all those other tantras too. So it's like a fractal. Like each tantra kind of reveals stuff from the other tantras. And you can read any one tantra through the lens of any other tantra. And so I just like to present this idea that this whole thing is your heritage. That if you are initiated into a tantric lineage, and arguably even if you have any interest in tantras whatsoever, you as a human being have inherited all of these tantras. So, if nothing else, maybe today's lecture can just be like a pitch for you to reclaim your inheritance. That all the practices and all the philosophies, you don't have to get them secondhand from interpreters on the internet. Like you can yourself go to the text and they're there for you. Of course, it's helpful to read the text in the context of a Gurukula, like to have a commentary and to be able to study it in a kind of grounded, systematic way. But the texts are there and all of them are great. There's no one text that is better than any other text. Of course, we all have our favorites. And Vijnana Bhairava tends to be one of our favorites in this community naturally. But we love them all. We love all the tantras. And I want to bring a little bit more awareness of these Shaiva Siddhanta texts, the Siddhanta texts, like the Tirumula, Tirumantiram, and things like that. That's a part of our heritage, I think, that we haven't yet reclaimed. Vijnana Bhairava, we know a lot about. I mean, debatable, but we do know a lot about the Vijnana Bhairava. And we of course know a lot about the text like Malini Vijayataro Tantra because a lot of scholarship has been done on the Kashmiri masters like Abhinava Gupta and others. But we don't yet know very much about texts like this. And I think it would be valuable to reclaim them, especially because they're gems like this one. Okay. So now let's get into it. Here's the practice. The first thing to understand, and we'll take it from a non-dual point of view, is that Shiva is synonymous with consciousness. And consciousness is the one indubitable fact of this life. Everything else I can doubt. But like I was saying last week, the one thing I cannot doubt is that I am. And there, Colleen's got it. But not only is that true, that I can't doubt that I am, the very nature of my I amness is in the form of awareness. I am because I know that I am. And to know that I am is to be. And that I amness is actually indubitable because if I try to doubt it, if I try to question it, I've already proved it. I at least exist as the one who has the doubt about my existence. So I exist as the doubter. I exist as the negator. And this also, friends, you get in our text. Netito mama odrekat. It says in our text that the self must exist because even to negate the self is to prove the self. Somebody must be realizing that there is no self. We had a big discussion there about like the response to classical Buddhism and the assertion of no self, and how in Shaivism it is important to assert a self. I am that self, and I immediately feel myself to be that. And so Shaiva Siddhanta is a realist school. It wants to assert the reality of the self and the reality of God and the reality of the world. So it needs to respond to these idealistic schools, especially these schools that reject the self, the existence of the self. So its claim is very simple. And even Shankara makes this claim actually in response to Buddhism. He says, to doubt it is to affirm it. So netito, the counterfactual, the pratiyogin, to use Nyaya terms here, this self is asserted almost through negation. The fact that I can negate it asserts it. Things like that. So we'll start with that I cannot deny or I cannot doubt that I am. And the reason I'm doing all of this is because I'm acutely aware of that fact. I am. And also, I am often a miserable asshole in this world, buffeted by desires and fears. I want this and I don't get it. I want this and I get it. I don't like it. I'm afraid of this, and then it comes and then it's worse than I thought it was going to be. Or it comes and it's not as bad as I thought it was going to be, but it was so terrible that for years I was afraid of it. Like, this is life. It's being buffeted by raga, dvesha, and abhinivesha. Like, I'm just craving, I'm just averse, and I'm just afraid, and it's all so stressful. It's all such a big burden on us. So because we feel that, we want some relief. Come to me, all ye who labor and are heavily laden, I will give you rest. What a promise. Like, we do feel labored and heavily laden, and we want to go and get some rest. But then the Christ has a second line there, which I think is worth noting. For my yoke is easy and my burden light. So he's like, look, I'm gonna whip your ass, like I'm gonna whip you into shape, but it's gonna be way better. You better choose the discipline and rigor of spiritual life over the alternative, because being in the world without spirituality, like not having these practices, not having this view, is much worse. Although having this view and having these practices is no walk in the park either. So choose me. I'll give you a burden, no doubt, but it's lighter. And I'll yoke you, yoga, right? Yoke. But it'll be easy. It'll be an easier yoke, because the thing that you're meditating on is lovely. It's beautiful. Who doesn't like to think about a beautiful thing all day? And who doesn't want to be burdened by every day having to do certain practices if they're wonderful? But this is the promise of spiritual life. And it wouldn't be appealing to us if we didn't feel ourselves to be, at least. So I am aware. Now, the observation that we want to make about awareness is stunning. And this is, of course, coming from a non-dual point of view. I am aware, but what is the nature of that awareness? It is very basically illumination. Very basically, the one thing I can say about awareness is that it's prakasha. Its nature is to illumine, to reveal. It has a revelatory function. And you can test this even now. I'm aware. What does it mean to be aware? Well, in some sense, consciousness is intentional, to use a technical phrase. I'm aware of certain things like my sensations, like I can smell things, the incense from the Shiva puja we did. I can smell that. I can smell the milk and the yogurt that we offered, the ghee. It's a wonderful smell. At least for now. If I leave it and don't wash it, tomorrow it won't be so wonderful. It'll be like vinegar. But today it smells sweet and nourishing and beautiful. I can smell that. Also, I can taste things. I can taste this tea and the sweet milk that was Shiva's Charnamrita. Like, I can taste that. There it is. I can see things. I can see Colleen is there, and I can see there's Viranata and Chris and Rose and all that. I'm seeing you. I can see Rose. I can see Theodore. So I'm having some kind of visual experience. And I can touch things and I can hear things. So these are the gocharas, the fields of sensation. And all of them are being revealed by awareness. Just notice right now that's what's happening. Like right now, as awareness, my main function, if you will, my main work, my main being is to reveal certain facts about my being, like smells and tastes and sights and textures and sounds. And not only is this physical world of sensation being illumined, as it were, but the mental world is also being illumined. So I'm aware of thoughts, emotions, I'm aware of dreams, memories, even when my mind is absent. And that same verse in the Raurava Agama actually says, like, even in deep sleep, when I don't actually have any experience of the body or mind, even there's some semblance of awareness, because even there, I know that I had no dreams, or I know that I slept deeply. That's why I wake up and say that. So there are arguments like this that are offered for how even in states where there are no sensations, no thoughts, no emotions, no dreams, no physical experience, even in those states, consciousness shines, prakasha. It still reveals, even if what it reveals is nothing. Often it's revealing sensation. Often it's revealing thoughts. But just notice this one fact, this stunning and beautiful fact, that even in the absence of all experience, I'm having an experience of absence, to put it in Sarvapriyanandaji's beautiful phrase. So like, it's not the case that I'm ever unaware. I'm always aware. And that awareness is essentially prakasha. Now, to this, there's actually various responses given. For instance, what about general anesthesia? And I don't buy the whole deep sleep thing. Like there are wonderful like philosophical debates that we can get into here regarding this claim that I'm always aware. Because there are times when it doesn't feel that doesn't feel true. And therefore, a very complex philosophy is also presented to distinguish awareness from mind. So mind is called Chidabhasa, the shadow of awareness. And in deep sleep and in general anesthesia, there is no mind. Therefore, there is no conscious feeling, but there is still consciousness. So consciousness is there. So distinguishing consciousness from mind is one way that Advaita Vedanta responds to the very valid attack. And the attack is, well, you're saying consciousness is eternal. Like, there's an eternalism here, but there are times when it doesn't feel like I'm conscious. Their consciousness goes away. It's just vijnana. It's just like another skanda. It's just there's vedana and there's samskara and it's just consciousness. It just comes and it goes. Little flashes, like little discrete flashes that come because of events. So I smell something, consciousness of that smell comes, the smell goes away, consciousness goes away. Chandrakirti says it's like two bales of hay. If the sense object falls away, consciousness of that sense object falls away too. There isn't one continuous consciousness that inheres all of the time. And if there were, I would be aware in deep sleep. I would be aware in general anesthesia. And I'm not, so there isn't. Tough luck. Gone is your consciousness. We've chopped it up. We're back to the void now. Something. But we don't need to get into that very beautiful and very important debate right now. Right now, the claim is just that your basic sense of self is premised upon this feeling of revealing, if you will, this illumination. And there's Jyotima, aptly named. So Jyotira Jyotir, the light of lights. I'm shining upon light and I'm shining upon darkness. The sun shines because I shine. If I wasn't here to see the sun might not be seen. So I can see, and therefore, because of my light, the light of awareness that I am, I experience the sun in a beautiful waxing crescent. It's a gorgeous crescent in like this absolutely cloudless California sky. It's stunning. The sun is just set, and there's this beautiful Panchami Ardendu, it's beautiful. But I can see that. And so the Chandra Jyotish, the light of the moon, the Ravi Jyotish, the light of the sun, the Agni Jyotish, the light of the fire, are all lights that are illumined by this light. I'm aware of the moon, I'm aware of the sun, I'm aware of the candles. In fact, I'm also aware that the candles on the altar have gone out. So do you mind if I just quickly replace them? Just give me 1 second. But it's important to make this point though, even in the absence of all lighters, and even in the absence of all lights, like if there were no moon, if there were no suns, if there were no fire or lamps, and that's the case. Like I have the oil, I have the wicks, I don't have any lighters. But even if there's no light, notice this, I'm still aware of the dark. So the light that shines even in the absence of all lights, the light that illumines darkness, is this consciousness, prakasha. No, I know, but it's like a whole thing. And that's the problem. The kind of incense that I was using to take it from the stove to the lamps is no longer available because I was doing that all day. So I ran through all of those incenses. Now I only have these beautiful Tibetan ones, and they're great, but they don't carry the fire quite as well. So no, I thought about that, but Mars will. So, importantly though, the basic quality of awareness. Oh yeah, oh true. But the incense, maybe. But anyway, the basic quality of consciousness, and this is very important, is that it shines. That's the first thing to point out. It's prakasha. But is it only prakasha? And that's where this tradition gets very interesting. The argument is that consciousness shines, but it doesn't just reveal objects or the lack thereof. In shining, it also reveals itself. I also reveal myself. So this next thing is added. It's called vimarshana or paramarsha. Consciousness is illumining, but it's also in touch with itself all the time. So I am aware and I am self-aware. Advaita Vedanta won't claim this, right? Advaita Vedanta doesn't actually think that there is this thing called vimarsha, and they too will say, then there wouldn't be like anesthesia or there wouldn't be like deep sleep, because if vimarsha, if self-awareness was always there in awareness, then you lose your distinction between awareness and mind, which is so important to Advaita Vedanta to defend against certain Buddhist claims, right? What is an AirTag lighter? I don't know about that. But yeah, I don't know. Anyway, I know philosophy, I don't know all these practical things. Someone needs to come and help out with all these things. So let's focus on this. So we have this idea that there is vimarsha, and that's not there in Advaita Vedanta. And then they're arguably like, if there is vimarsha, how do you account for the fact that there are times when I don't feel aware, like in general anesthesia and in deep sleep? And you could say in those moments, I am aware. That's why I'm able to say after I wake up, if you will, once I regain my powers of speech, that I slept deeply. If there wasn't some feeling to that, I wouldn't be able to express it. So you get into debates like this, and we don't need to go there now. It's not the purpose of this discussion. But the claim is that there is consciousness, and consciousness is always self-aware. It's always reposing in its own sense of self. And then further claims are made. What is that vimarshana actually? We call it Shakti. It's power. It's a kind of power actually to be able to be self-aware. And not only is it self-awareness, it's bliss. Because when you're self-aware and you are consciousness, and we're going to make a few extra claims about consciousness in just a few moments, you're naturally going to be blissful. Why? Because notice, a limit, and we talked about this last week towards the end of the class, a limit is defined as where one thing ends and another thing begins. You see, paricheda. So if X ends here, it's because Y begins here. So X is limited by Y insofar as X has an end and Y has a beginning. So this is how limitation works. But have you ever encountered a limit to consciousness? In other words, is there anything outside of your conscious experience that you can point to that would somehow circumscribe it or limit it? Notice, the moment you point to something outside of your conscious experience, it is no longer outside of your conscious experience. So this question is nonsensical. I'm asking you, is there something you can point to outside of your conscious experience that you can posit as a limit to consciousness? And unfortunately, that's impossible. It's impossible to offer the kind of proof that we're looking for here. Because consciousness is all that you have access to. And to posit that there is something outside of consciousness is just to believe in some kind of fantasy. Like you can never, even in principle, verify that. And so this claim is remarkable and stunning and a little bit scary. And the claim is this: everything that is in consciousness, in your consciousness, in your light, in the light that you are. And you'll never be able to show anything differently. You'll never be able to disprove this. Because by proving it, you've already brought it into consciousness. Now, one misunderstanding of this would be like a solipsistic misunderstanding. So you might say like, oh, well, are you saying that only if I can see it, it therefore exists? So if I don't see it, it doesn't exist? If I'm not experiencing it, it doesn't exist? If I don't know about it, it doesn't exist? What a horrible view of the world. That the only things that are existing are things within my very limited scope of knowledge. The only things that exist are in my very limited scope of perception. Isn't this the first thought that comes to mind when you hear a view like this? When we say consciousness alone exists and everything that exists in consciousness, you might say, well, that's very sad. Because it seems like consciousness is so limited. I only know X amount of things, or I only experience Y amount of things. Surely there is a world beyond Y. Surely there's a world beyond X. This is our feeling. And there is. But just because something is beyond perception does not mean that it's beyond consciousness. Just because something is beyond knowledge does not mean that it's beyond consciousness. This is where a stunning claim is made. We're distinguishing consciousness from the set called knowledge and the set called perception. So right now, and we've offered this proof many times, but it's worth repeating because it's kind of guided meditation actually. So right now, notice I'm seeing a lot of things. Actually, I'm seeing very few things. There's so many things here that I cannot see actually. And also things that I can see but probably will not see. We have a collection of tarot decks. And right now, I can only see the Marseille deck and a few different versions of the Pamela Coleman Smith deck, right? So there's the Golden Tarot, there's the big one. There's a Morgan Greer, I think, over there. But there are also a bunch of other decks that I can't see because it's dark. So I could see them, but I'm not seeing them. And there are things that I cannot see ever, like microbes or something like that. And there are things that are like beyond this room, like what my neighbors might be doing in the apartment next door. But I don't from this say that there aren't other tarot decks there, or there aren't microbes, or there aren't neighbors. Obviously, I'm free to assume that there are neighbors and microbes and tarot decks, but I'm just able to now say that they're outside of the scope of my perception. They're there in the realm of the unperceived or unperceivable. So now two categories exist in awareness. The perceivable, which all like arguably is a very small category, and the unperceivable and non-perceivable. That's a big category, but it's still in awareness, no? It's still there in awareness as the raw potential to be perceived. And now come to knowledge. It's not just about perception, it's about knowledge. I know that my neighbors are there. In fact, I'm pretty sure that they're both there right now, the neighbors. But I don't know who's maybe over there. Some people moved out, and I don't think anybody moved in, but I don't know if anybody moved in or not. Actually, there's a light in the window. So the lights are on, but nobody is home. Who knows? But I don't know. And does that mean they don't exist? Because I don't know that there are people there, they're therefore not there? No, I mean, clearly there could be people there that I don't know about. But just because they are outside the realm of my knowing doesn't mean they're outside the realm of consciousness. So notice, consciousness is all pervasive. It's everywhere. And it's you. This is the radical shift. Like usually we feel like there is a world and I am aware of it. No, I am aware and within that awareness appears a world. There is no objective independent world apart from my perceptions and apart from my knowing, apart from my experiencing. I can't verify or access that world. And even if there was, it's still within consciousness as the not yet perceived or unperceivable, or the unknown or the unknowable. Like they're all still in consciousness. So now I have this reality called consciousness. And hopefully we can see how all pervasive it is. And now something very interesting has happened. I am this light shining, and in my light everything shines. But why do I feel localized to only this part of the field? So I've identified with a very small part of the overall field of awareness. Remember, I am awareness. That's what I feel myself to be. And as awareness, I'm a light. And as a light, I shine on all this. All this is in me. And yet, the only things that I'm willing to call me are these sets of organs and this skin and this mind. Isn't that weird? Why is it that I, as awareness, which can feel itself to be everywhere, why is it that I prefer to localize myself to just this individual? So this is called sankocha, contraction. Like I, awareness, am all pervasively present everywhere, and yet I identify with only a very small part of the overall field. This is in effect bondage. Bondage is the play of awareness, which identifies itself with the limited, when in actuality it is the unlimited. So the unlimited awareness, which you are, is called Shiva, but that same Shiva for fun, assumes the form of a fettered, bound individual by limiting its identification to one part of the overall field. So I am this person. These are my things. Those aren't my things. These are my things. This is my body. This is my mind. This is my prana. And I am the one to whom all this is attributed. So I've accretized all these experiences around a common center, and I've disambiguated that center from all the other centers, from all the other things. So this is the opening teaching of the Isha Upanishad. Isha vasyam midagam sarvam yatkincha jagatyang jagata. Don't covet any wealth because, friend, it's already yours. In the sense that it all appears in consciousness, and I am consciousness. So I contain multitudes. What would I ever want for? Everything that's happening is happening right now, and I am doing it through every mouth and through every hand. And, this feeling is what I truly am. And yet I don't feel that way. And yet I covet things because I feel like they're not mine. And yet I feel like I'm this little guy, when in truth I am all of this. So Shiva eva grhitva pashubhavaha. Lord Shiva alone assumes the form of a fettered being. But right now I just want to point you to how this happens. It happens because I, the all-pervasive awareness, have limited my I, and voluntarily, as it were, as we claim, voluntarily decided to be just Nishant. And Nishant's pretty great, no problem. That's the problem. He's fallen in love with this limited version. And so this jiva, this pashu, is really just Shiva playing out this limitation just for fun. So it's perfectly within his control not to be an individual, but he chooses to be an individual, arguably, and then goes on like life after life, accruing karmas and having to pay for them. So there's this wheel of samsara, if you will, that, and this is very important, that Lord Shiva voluntarily participates in by contracting towards a limited center of consciousness. When in fact, he is the unlimited, all-pervasive consciousness, which is in all things, as all things. But hopefully now you can see that like what I'm talking about, this light that I'm talking about, you already feel yourself to be. Do you see, like, Shiva is not some other thing. He's not some like blue guy seated on a meditation mat. I mean, he is that insofar as that is also revealed by consciousness. But when we say Shiva, notice I'm specifically pointing you to you, but you in the most expansive understanding of you. You not as the body, you not as the mind, but you as the light that shines upon all bodies and all minds. You are already that light. So that light is what is called Shiva, and that's why Abhinavagupta says, now Paya Jalam. You can't reveal this light with any practice because practices are on the level of the body and the mind. And you are not the body and the mind. You are this awareness that shines upon the body and the mind. So therefore, it's awareness that shines on your practice, not your practice that reveals awareness to you. And you are already awareness. So the first word in this verse can already liberate you. Because it just says, Chid, Drishatmani, like through awareness is the self almost. The self is awareness, and like seeing is being. You are that seeing, that experiencing awareness, and it's not limited by the body and mind. So here you get a kind of implied Drishyam Shariram. In the Shiva Sutra, which is a non-dual text from Vasugupta, we get this verse, Drishyam Shariram. If I can see it, I am it. Imagine living in that way. Everything in your field of vision is you. Feel yourself to be embodied as the whole. Because if it's in awareness, it must be in me, for I am awareness. So I am as much here as I am there. I just right now have a preference for here. I feel like I'm more here than I am there. But the fact of the matter is, both here and there appear in awareness. So there I am. Here I am. Where am I not? That feeling, Drishyam Shariram. And in this very first phrase, this Chid Drishat Mani, you already get this idea that the Atma is none other than this drashta, this seer, which is none other than the light, prakasha of consciousness reposing in its own self-aware bliss. Okay, next claim. So awareness is not limited by anything because like we just proved, nothing is outside of awareness. So if you felt yourself to be not localized in any one place, but rather present in all places all the time, which is possible for you even now. If you felt yourself as that, in effect, you are feeling yourself as the unlimited, as the Purna Hanta, as the complete I amness. What would that feel like? I mean, just for fun, just as a kind of philosophical conjecture, what would it feel like to be unlimited? You know, like to perceive your being as being all pervasive with no limit anywhere. Just imagine this ocean with no horizon, an ocean expanding into every direction all at once. That's what you are. An unlimited ocean of light, of awareness. What would that feel like? And we argue it feels like bliss. And it doesn't necessarily mean happiness. It means fulfillment. In fact, bliss, Jagad Ananda, it means wholeness, fullness, right? And Anahata is asking the most important question, you know, and now we're gonna like try to answer it because this question is so beautiful and like the whole lecture is really an answer to Anahata's question right now. Because all of this sounds good, but why do I still feel like this person? You know, and that's what the practice is for. So I'm coming to it. It's gonna be so exciting because that's the main thing. Just give me a few more minutes, about 15 or so more minutes, and I think we'll be done and we'll take some Q&A. Q&A is important so we can contextualize the practice more. Okay, so here we go. Bear with me. If I feel myself to be the all-pervasive awareness, I also feel myself to be unlimited. According to the Chandogya Upanishad, there's a beautiful phrase in there. Yo vai bhuma tat sukham, nalpe sukham asti. The vast is bliss or joy. There is no joy in the limited. So notice anytime you feel upset in life, it's because you wanted to do something, but you met an obstacle, a limit. You know, like you wanted to go somewhere, but you couldn't. You wanted to do something, but you couldn't. Or you thought something, but you were wrong. So you were limited in your action, limited in your knowledge, maybe even limited in your inspiration, energy, desire, willingness, and therefore we suffer. We're suffering actually limitation. Paricheda, Sankocha, that's samsara. Samsara is any time we experience a limit, whether on the level of the intellect or on the level of the body. But if I'm not identifying with the intellect or the body, which are naturally going to be quite limited, if I'm identifying with awareness, which I just showed has no limit, then won't I experience myself as unlimited? And if suffering is the experience of limitation, as anybody can verify in living life, then don't you think the antithesis of limitation would also be the antithesis of suffering, which is bliss? Fullness, whatever that is, it must be bliss. It's the thing that we want by virtue of being the opposite of what we don't want, maybe. You can just do that kind of thought experiment. So the goal is to recognize what you are, what you always were, which you for fun forgot, or for fun play at not knowing. And that is your own unlimited, all-pervasive, wholesome nature as the Purnahangta, the complete I amness. To feel that is to be saturated with an unbelievable bliss. A bliss that cannot be described, so much so that St. Paul just called it the peace that passeth all understanding. Not to say that these are necessarily the same thing, not to say they're necessarily having the same experience, not to overgeneralize and homogenize everyone into one common spiritual revelation. Everyone's different and everyone experiences God differently. But I love the phrase. That's all I'm really getting at with that. That it passes all understanding. Like we don't know even how it could feel because we don't know it. But to know it, notice, is to be unlimited. And to be unlimited is to be blissful. So what happens when you're blissful? So then this is the third claim. So the first claim is, okay, to track all of this, the first claim is that I am consciousness, and consciousness is of the nature of light, and that light is unlimited. The second claim is that I, consciousness, am self-aware, and that to be self-aware is to be aware of my limitless nature, which is synonymous with bliss. Now, the third claim is, if I'm self-aware in my own bliss, if I'm reposing in my own infinite bliss, I will be endowed with arousal. I'll have desire. And so now the claim, this is where it gets maybe more religious or mystical, is that to feel awareness is to feel its innate pulse, its throb, its creativity. Awareness is innately aroused, innately inspired, innately desirous. And you yourself know what this is like on this level too. When you feel blissful, you also feel like acting. You know, when you're happy and you know it, clap your hands. If you're happy and you know it, clap your hands. Like the clapping of your hands is a natural outpouring of your joy. What do you do when you're filled to the brim with joy? You laugh. You know, you write a poem, you dance, you sing, you play the flute, you bang a drum, something. You know, I'm thinking of a T-Rex song. But why do we get it on? Because we're full, ideally. You know, we express ourselves from a place of fullness. So the third claim is that if you are Prakasha, if Shiva is indeed the unlimited light of awareness, reposing in his own bliss through the power of his self-awareness, which we call Shakti, then that Shiva Shakti Yamala, that union of awareness and self-awareness, is naturally, blissfully expressive. It's horny, as it were, for ejaculation. And so this is why the word visarga is an ejaculation. This happens when Shiva and Shakti make love, is that they come. And what is it to come? It's this. This whole world is the ecstatic blazing forth of God. It's the ejaculation of God. That's the language that we get in the tradition sometimes. So this world happens, as it were, as a result of God rejoicing in her own bliss. In other words, this whole world is consciousness reposing in its own blissful, unlimited freedom. Okay, now having said all of this, you have to understand that by the word Shiva, we mean this awareness, which is self-aware, which manifests this entire world in play. And in manifesting this world, we see that this is a threefold manifestation of willing, knowing, and doing. So Lord Shiva essentially is that awareness which reposes in its own bliss, which wills, knows, and acts. So each one of us wills and knows and acts. And in truth, we will and we know and act because Shiva, the one awareness which we are, is willing, knowing, and acting through us. So now notice I'm shifting my language a little bit to a more dualistic framework because now I want to be very real and speak on a very practical level. We can hear all of this stuff and it's so cool, right? It's like, and it's true. It's true. Everything that's been said so far will resonate usually because it's a non-dual claim, and a non-dual claim often resonates with many people who hear it. Not all people, but many people, because we sense the truth in it. Intuitively, we intuitively understand oneness. We seek oneness in every domain of our life. In chemistry, we're looking for oneness. In physics, we're looking for a unified field. In our family structures, we're looking and often failing to get oneness. And in relationships, we want oneness. The only reason we're interested in sex at all is because we care about oneness, because we want two bodies, or in San Francisco's case, more than two bodies to become one body. But like all of that is just the pursuit of Advaita. We all crave that Advaita and we seek it out in various forms. So when an Advaitic claim is presented, that there is only one reality and baby, you're it, the heart sings. But then when the rubber hits the road, see what happens. Do you know what I mean? Like, we speak about these things, we hear about these things, and we understand these things, and then we go into the world and we realize that we can't cash in on our bank balance. We have $1 million in the bank. We can't spend any of it because the next time I encounter something that challenges my ego, I forget that I have the all-pervasive consciousness. Maybe someone takes something from me. No longer do I feel myself in that person. No longer do I feel like everything is mine and therefore there is no scarcity. Now I feel like, oh my God, I'm in a state of scarcity because somebody who is different from me, who has come and taken something which is different from me. So this thing which is different from me, which I covet, has been taken by someone which is different from me, and I'm plunged back into a world of duality. And that world is a world of fear, a world of desire, a world of um, aversions and attachments and whatnot. Yeah. So this is porch pirate Visada yoga. So isn't this like such an important observation? Arguably one of the most important observations we could make if we're serious about spiritual life. That after hearing all this Advaita, and you know what? It's wonderful. It's still good. You should continue hearing Advaita. In fact, your very blood should tingle with the message of Advaita. You should continue reading Advaitic text, hearing Advaitic lectures, because that's also part of the practice. Shravana, Manana, Nidhyasana. We know about that. But you know, I think what the Shaiva Siddhanta has to offer is maybe a more, dare I say, for most of us, for the vast majority of us, a more compelling view by virtue of being more common sense and by virtue of appealing to practical concerns such as this. Why is it that if indeed Shiva is consciousness and if indeed I am synonymous and one with Shiva, why is it the case that I don't feel that to be true? You know, and now Shaiva Siddhanta will say, I'll give this example. I love this example. It's so beautiful. It's the example of the patala. Patala means cataract. So Shaiva Siddhanta, and in fact the Malini Vijayatara also, but many texts present in the Shaiva tradition, present this idea of mala, impurity. So now we come to the fourth point. So we've already made 3 points about the absolute nature of reality. But the fourth point is, why don't I feel this to be true? Why am I still stuck as this limited locus of awareness? Like, why do I identify with body, mind? Why don't I feel myself to be all pervasive? And if, by the way, what we just said in the last 3 premises is arguing for an absolute reality that is also endowed with infinite power. The power of self-awareness, the power of willing, the power of knowing, the power of doing. So to be Shiva is to be unlimited, all-pervasive, omniscient, and omnipotent. You see, it's not just, oh, I'm just a passive, actionless, powerless, absolute consciousness that doesn't even know itself. What good is that? It's like a pot. But this is an awareness that's endowed with Ananta Shakti Paripurna, unlimited powers of fullness. So therefore, to be Shiva is to be omnipotent, omniscient, and all-pervasive. That's nothing could be further from the truth in our own lives. We're not omniscient. There's so many things we don't know and we suffer for it. We're not omnipotent. There's so many things that we can't do and we suffer for it. And we certainly don't feel unlimited. We feel very limited. And hence we suffer. Why? Now, what we're going to say in the tradition is because of mala. Mala, not mala. Mala. Once I said to Rose, actually, I was like, I did X number of malas today, but like I didn't use so I said malas, and it was very funny to me because I was like, oh yeah, I did a lot of impure. I guess like I did this many impurities because the word mala means impurity, mala means garland. So when you're reporting how many malas of your rosary, you're like, I did one round of 108. I did 10 malas of my rosary. It's like 10 malas versus 10 malas. Like the difference between Shraddha and Shraddha. One means faith and the other means funeral. The difference of one long letter. So Mala, not Mala, but Mala means impurity. And the tradition argues for 3 of them. Just as there are 3 eternal categories, Pati, Pasha, and Pashu, there are 3 Malas, and they are beginningless. In fact, the main mala, the original mala, like a kind of original sin even, if you will, is called Pashutva. Pashutva is otherwise known as Anava mala, and it's that which makes us feel limited. So to Anahata Devi's question, like, why do I feel limited? Why can't I, and the way you're phrasing it is so beautiful and devotional. Why can't I find Shiva? Where is he? Why can't I feel him? Why can't I find him? If you say he's all pervasive, he should be here, he should be now. But I don't feel that. And the way you're saying it is, how can you find it if you are centered already? You can't get out of yourself. You can't get beyond yourself. You can't get behind yourself. It's not gibberish, Anahata Devi. I think you've hit the nail right on the head. And you've put the nail in the coffin here. Because this is where our spirituality usually dies. It's where all our lofty concepts die, in application. Look, and I'll just say this. We can cheat others, we can never cheat ourselves. Do you know what I mean? We can like sculpt really, really beautiful Instagram profiles and say whatever we want online. Like we can create an image of liberation in front of others. And that's wonderful. Like, may everyone be empowered in doing that. But at the end of the day, you have to be accountable to your own experience. And so the quality of your life is itself the test of your spirituality. Are you actually free? And if you are you filled with joy and bliss? Because it seems like we parade around with that pretense of being free, but we aren't. And if we're going to be honest, we have to admit that something is not clicking. I'm hearing these philosophies. I think I understand them. I think I know them, but somehow I'm not benefiting by them. I'm not enjoying them. So what's up? What's going on? And so that's why we come to this conclusion of like, I need some explanation, something more grounded. And so there are some people, by the way, for whom hearing the teaching immediately flowers into living the teaching. There are definitely people like that. And so for those people, arguably like adepts or savants or something like that, the teaching alone is all you need. And even that maybe might not be needed. So mala here, in this context, is seen as merely ignorance. Right? We looked at the Paramarthasara and we looked at Tantrasara, and you'll see in Tantrasara, Abhinavagupta has a verse defining mala in chapter 1. And he's saying mala, impurity, is agyana. It's just ignorance. And when the full moon of knowledge, he says, Purna Jnana Chandra rises, that ignorance is dispelled and you are free. So he's saying, Shastra malam rahite, that which is called mala by our Shastra, is not a real thing, you guys. It's not an actual problem. It's just ignorance, according to Abhinavagupta and the non-dualist, but not according to the Siddhanta. The Siddhanta says it is a real thing. It's not a matter of ignorance, because you could still have knowledge and not be free of suffering. And so the example they give is of the patala. I love this example. It's so compelling. So a cataract, an eye cataract. So if you have a cataract, you might see wrongly. Oh, actually, no. Better than patala is jaundice. Jaundice is a better example. So let's say a person gets jaundice, like very severe jaundice, right? There's a defect, like an actual physical defect in the eye, which causes them to see white as yellow. Are you familiar with the condition, jaundice? So a person who's jaundiced might see yellow where there isn't, right? So now, let's say that person goes to the doctor and says, "Oh, doctor, I'm seeing everything yellow," like the Coldplay song. Sorry, somebody made a Coldplay. Like I didn't yet catch up to the Coldplay cheating kind of meme, and then I was like talking about like something in the lecture, and someone was like, "Oh, I guess you could just go to a Coldplay concert," and I didn't get the joke. I was like, "Oh, like is it?" Now I get it. Yeah, I know it's. Anyway, so Coldplay, that song Yellow. So like let's say like you go to the doctor and you say, and it was all yellow, and the doctor will say, "Okay, what color is this?" And the doctor, she might point to like a piece of paper, a white piece of paper, and you'll say, "It's yellow," and the doctor will say, "No, it's not. It's actually white. And my good sir, you have jaundice. Here, take this medicine and you'll stop seeing everything yellow and you'll start seeing things as white." So the person goes home and takes the medicine, and true enough, in the course of a few weeks or so, they start seeing everything as white. Now, I want to ask this question. Was the knowledge that it was white, not yellow, the same thing as seeing white for this person? It was not. Do you see? The person can know that it's white, but still see yellow. In other words, you can know that you are Shiva, but still feel like a Pashu. Just like a person who has jaundice can still see yellow even after they have the settled conviction that what is in front of them is actually white. Do you see where the shoe pinches here? So when you take the Shaiva Siddhanta view, which I'm going to try to represent now, you become a little bit more practical and tangible with your concept of mala, impurity. Whereas in the non-dual view, which of course most of the time we're partial to, impurity is not a thing. It's just ignorance. It's just there's no such thing as impurity. There's no physical defect in your eye, except that your intellect is misguided. And so the metaphor, maybe Shankara gives a good one, like there's a rope that appears to be a snake. The problem is not with my eye. The problem is also not with the rope. There's no real snake there, which is occluding the rope. The problem is that I have imagined a snake where there is only really a rope. Now, if I know that the snake doesn't exist, won't I just see the rope? And if I don't see the rope, it's only because I'm seeing the snake. So what I have to give up is not the snake, it's my assumption that there is a snake. Similarly, here, what I have to give up in the non-dual view is not impurity, it's the assumption of impurity. Whereas in the dualistic view, no, there's a real snake, and the fucker is going to bite me. Like I have to do something about it. Tomorrow is a Nag Panchami also, so you have to worship the snake if you have Sarpa dosha. like be careful. There's a real snake, and there's also a real rope. And the real snake is gonna fuck your shit up until you do something about it, and you'll never get to the real rope. So this view is the view of the cataract, patala. There is a real cataract in my eye, and it's causing me to see one moon as double moon. Reka Timira, what is it called? Dilopia, the kind of double vision kind of thing. And you know what? Just knowing that there is one moon won't actually fix that I'm seeing two moons. Somebody has to come with a surgeon's scalpel and then cut out the cataract, and then I will actually see one moon. Somebody has to come with a medicine for jaundice, and then I will actually see white. Until then, until I take the actual medicine, I will never get over the actual problem. I will only talk and talk and talk about white. I'll never see white. I'll only talk and talk and talk about oneness. But in my view, two moons only. And all the desire and fear and problems that come with that. So Shaiva Siddhanta will say, don't cheat yourself. You need Diksha. Diksha is an actual surgical process by which Lord Shiva's grace descends and the mala, especially Anava mala, what's called Pashutva, begins to get dislodged. But no, more important than Diksha is that you do the thing that comes with Diksha, the spiritual practice. And through that spiritual practice, through regular, consistent, dogged, uninterrupted practice, slowly, slowly, slowly. Of course, we're all different. So the amount of practice that one person needs obviously differs from the amount of practice that another person needs, because we're all working with like different degrees of cataracts, if you will, or different stages of jaundice. But like as we do the practice, as per Diksha, as we immerse ourselves in this practice, which we're going to present now, something actually changes. And then we realize, oh my God, they were right. It is white. And now I see that. Before this, I affirmed it. I believed it. I was convinced of it, but I didn't see it. I didn't feel it. I didn't cash in on it. But now, thanks to my practice, I no longer feel like I can't find him. I am him, and it's true. I feel that I am him. That's the goal, at least. And it's through practice that we get this goal. So how do we do it? How do we go from feeling ourselves to be a limited, bound soul, a pashu, which identifies with only one part of the field, with only the body and mind, and with the energy, and with the void, and with this limitation? How do I go from the limited sense of myself to the unlimited sense of myself? How do I get over pashutva, or what is otherwise called Anava Mala? And of course, with Anava Mala comes two other malas. Like there's Maya Mala, which is the experience of duality. If I feel limited, it's also because I feel like I'm not other things. And if I'm not other things, then there are things that I want and things that I don't want. And therefore, I have Karma Mala, not Karma. Karma means action. And action, Karma, comes from the Karma Mala. Karma is the adjectival form. So doership. I do things in the world and reap the rewards, meaning the karmas, because I see those things as different from me. And the reason I see those things as different from me is because of this primordial Anavamala. Now, in the non-dual traditions, like it's all a game. Like Lord Shiva, for fun, assumes these malas. Like he, for fun, contracts so he can play this game and just go through life after life after life. But in the Shaiva Siddhanta, or in the Siddhanta, it's not like that. It's like each soul has always existed alongside Shiva, and these malas, especially Anava Mala, is beginningless. It's always been there. But this is where it gets interesting. Whether you're a non-dualist or a dualist, you will at least assert this. Lord Shiva is God, and his name, Shiva, and there are no proper nouns in Sanskrit, so Shiva just means blessing and auspiciousness. Lord Shiva will never remain a Pashu forever. Like he's always unfolding himself to himself. So part of his play is bondage, but the same play of bondage is also the play of liberation. And this is his Vichitra Krida, his strange and wondrous play that he binds himself and frees himself again and again and again, as if he's entering and exiting, as if he's making love to his Shakti. So why is he bound? Because he wants to be. But the moment he becomes bound, he's already affected his own escape. You see, to become bound is to almost like already immediately springboard back. There's like an inbuilt spiritualizing feature. Why? Otherwise, why is Shiva just bound forever? So he gets bound and then he plays the game of getting free. But what does that look like? And that's okay. In the non-dual tradition, he prefers to be bound and then he tries to get himself free by gracing himself. But then in the dualistic tradition, remember, he doesn't become the souls. The souls are there. Right, right, Ruth. Taking off the ski boots is the best feeling. That's so profound, actually. The only reason I put the ski boots on is so I can ski. But then sooner or later, I don't want to stop skiing, right? Like, and I take the boots off, and it feels so good to take them off, especially when I put them on in the first place. So Shiva puts on ski boots, skis for a while, and then it's like, fuck this. It's cold. This is exhausting. I'm hungry and I want to go home. And then he takes off the ski boots. But skiing was great. And you wouldn't get the joy of taking off the boots if you didn't put them on in the first place. So you won't get the absolute joy of remembering if you don't at least play at forgetting. So we say, Kintu Durgata Karitvat, Swachandyan Nirmala Daso, Swatma Prachadana Krida, Pandita Parameshwaraha. Lord Shiva, this is a verse from Tantra Loka. Lord Shiva is ever skilled. He's a Pandit. Pandita Parameshvara. He is ever skilled at this game, Krida, of Swatma Nivarana, hiding himself from himself. But while he does this, he never once loses his freedom or independence. So Mananda gives us the view of a king who, just for fun, pretends to be a foot soldier, or a beggar. Does the king ever stop being a king? No. The king always is a king and always knows that he's a king, even when he's dressed in rags as a beggar. So anyway, all of that to say, in the non-dual tradition, Lord Shiva decides to become a Pashu. He goes on this journey, and part of that journey is to enjoy the world. He's enjoying it. It's boga. There's nothing wrong with that. But then he decides to realize God, and then he goes on this like return journey, and it's all wonderful. Like, if you haven't yet realized that you're Shiva, like, by the way, many people studying Advaita Vedanta, they're really hard on themselves when they realize their Advaita Vedanta doesn't work in the world. So, bless you, Rose. So they do some Advaita Vedanta, allergic to this Advaita Vedanta. They do some Advaita Vedanta, and it's good to see that you're doing better. I know that you're recovering, and so it's so nice to see that you're like almost in full bloom. I think in full bloom. Like, anyway, get well soon. Definitely before Friday, so you can come. But so there's this idea that, Advaita Vedanta, yes. You could be so hard on yourself, right? Like, if you learn some Advaita, Rose, I was talking to Rose, but you could be so hard on yourself for not living your Advaita. Do you know what I mean? Like, you could learn, you could go and listen to lectures, and then you think that you're enlightened, and then you go into the world and you realize, oh my God, I just got my heart broken. How enlightened could I be if I'm this upset? And if I'm this attached to this partner, or if I'm this attached to this job? Like, I'm suffering, and I'm finally bold enough to admit that I'm suffering, but I shouldn't be suffering because I learned all this Advaita Vedanta. No, now you're suffering, and you're suffering the fact that you're suffering because you're beating yourself up with your own Advaita. So the Advaita that was supposed to free you is now there to punish you, to make you feel like I should have known better. Like, but like, notice this, it's violent only because like the play is fun too. Like, the idea that you should not play and that you're a fool for playing is dispelled right now by saying that, like, no, 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 no. The journey is as valuable as the destination. So don't be so eager to realize Advaita all at once, because that might not be the best outcome. Like, then you don't get to play this wonderful game that Shiva wants to play of being bound and being free. So Shiva wants to go to Advaita lectures. He wants to get inspired by those ideas. He wants to read Ramana Maharshi one time and then go on the internet and pretend to be a guru. He like wants to go and like mansplain Advaita to people based on the one time he read half of Nisargadatta Maharaja's I Am That. And he wants to do that. And that's fun for him. But then he realizes that like maybe he wants to actually be happy and not just parade around as being a non-dual like person. Then that's part of the game too. And then there's a journey there. So in the non-dual view, we don't want to like cheat ourselves out of the story. And now come back to the dualistic view. The same kind of positive, life-affirming thing is offered. And it's this, that like the souls are eternal, right? Yeah, we're here for the plot. And Shiva is so kind that he creates a world in which these eternal souls can play out all of their karmas. And they can do this ad infinitum as long as they want. So as long as they want to enjoy the world, Shiva provides a world for them to enjoy. So God is not different in the sense that like, anya san vyapito nanyaha, there's this beautiful karma anusarataha in the Shiva Jnana Bodha. It tells us that Lord Shiva is beyond the world, yet his presence can be felt in the world, almost like as the world. Although Shaiva Siddhanta will say there's a bit of a difference. But still, isn't it a beautiful world? We want to say life is suffering, death is suffering, birth is suffering, where suffering, suffering, suffering. But like, also joy, right? Like that's equally, I mean, like it's like suffering is a kind of joy too. Like there's a plot, there's a meaning to my suffering. Suffering isn't bad. It must be good because at least it brought me to spiritual life. And it's not just suffering. Like, yeah, you could be pessimistic if you want. You could say like, okay, so you buy a house. You're like, this is the first day of my house. And then someone comes and says, it's also the first day of your house's destruction. Like something good can come into your life. And then some person in saffron robes might come up to you and be like, and it spells the end and like there will be destruction and death. Like, okay, like if you're like so attached to suffering, you must be enjoying it too. You must be enjoying pointing out to others that everything is suffering. You're getting some kind of sick, sadistic glee from trying to teach others that everything is suffering. Like you're inflicting your pessimism on everyone, And that must be enjoyable to you. Otherwise, why have you dedicated your life to it? Why did you get on boats and go to all the corners of the world to like tell them that life is suffering, birth is suffering, death is suffering, it's all suffering. Everything that could possibly bring you joy will one day bring you suffering. So stop being happy. Like, okay, that's actually a really awesome teaching for a certain kind of person. But for a lot of us, it's really pessimistic, isn't it? Like, it just makes you feel a certain way about the world, that the world is this debauched and horrible place. And it's not just, I mean, a lot of traditions have this view, like the world is a fallen place. It's a place of sin and impurity, the place of the demiurge. God has nothing to do with this world. God is beyond the world. In fact, it sucks that you're here. It's your original sin that brought you to this world of debauchery and sin and death and decay. And if they don't say sin, they'll say stupidity. It's your own ignorance, it's your own trishna, your own thirst that causes you to wander this hell of samsara. Hare, how much hell must be in your heart to project it all around you? How much sin and impurity must be in your mind to project it all around you? The joyful see the world as a place of joy. Nirvana and samsara are the same. That's Nagarjuna's realization that what you're calling samsara is just a point of view. It's nirvana, actually. This whole thing is nirvana. And you can read that in many different ways. But here's my claim. Shiva did not create this world as a fallen place for you to come and like suffer in hell. In fact, there are hells. Like Shiva does actually create hells also, but that's also part of your like fun. And so in Somananda, he says something so radical. He says, just as a king desires to be a beggar or a foot soldier, just like that, Lord Shiva desires to be a person boiling in hell for fun. And hells are not eternal. It's just a temporary state of torture, but he likes it. He's kinky. He likes being in hell. And you too like being in terrible relationships. Otherwise, why do you keep entering into them? Like you must be getting something. So it's, even in like the most horrible suffering, we're getting something out of it. And that's a radical claim. It's a claim of theodicy that's very hard to accept. That like this is all play and Lord Shiva desires to enter into situations that are bad for him too. Why? And you could say, one, because there's bhoga, there's some enjoyment that you can get through that, but also because there's learning. If like God did not provide a world with all of this kind of like opportunities to get burned and like, there wouldn't be growth of the soul, arguably. So the enjoyment of the world is twofold. The world is interesting actually because it's not just one thing, because it's suffering and joy, pain and pleasure, happiness and sorrow. It's this all continually alternating thing keeps everything kind of interesting actually. So the world is interesting, it's fun, and as long as I want to play in it, I can. But sooner or later, I might desire something else other than this world. And so when I want apavarga as opposed to bhoga, I'm using Sankhyan phrases, then Lord Shiva, not only was his grace there already as the world to give me a place to like mature and to learn and to act out my karmas, but his grace manifests most considerably in the form of a guru. So now in the Shiva, the Shaiva revelation, in the Shiva traditions, guru is very important. In fact, Lord Shiva himself comes as the guru. And so it's Shiva. Shiva is the guru. Shiva guru, we say. And Shiva appears from time to time like, Dakshinamurti or like Shri Kanta or something like that. He doesn't take avatars per se in the Shaiva tradition, but all his gurus are his avatars. And they are the conduit through which his grace flows into the world. So if Lord Shiva just created a world and souls are eternally doomed to wander this samsara with no way out, that would suck. But not only did he create a world, but he also gave a way out for those who want it without imposing it on anybody. So for the ones who want like to go beyond the world or to realize God and to realize the world as God, for those who want spirituality, in other words, those who want moksha or yoga as opposed to just bhoga, those who want this kind of thing, for them there is spiritual revelation, usually coming in the form of a guru who gives a mantra and who gives a practice. So the grace of Lord Shiva is proved by the fact that there are liberated people, the fact that there is such a thing as liberation, and the fact that there are means for liberation. So in the non-dual view, Lord Shiva graces himself, he plays the game, and then he plays the game of trying to get free again. And all of that, he's his own guru, like all of that's happening. In the Shaiva Siddhanta, Lord Shiva is different from the Pashu, but comes into the Pasha, into the world of the Pashus, in order to like give them knowledge. So now Lord Shiva in the Raudava Agama is going to do just that. So for those of us who are burdened and heavily laden and desire rest, now we come to the Shiva and ask him, what do we do? And he gives us a mantra. He gives us a practice. In his mercy, he tells us, do this. If you are wise, he says, the suddhi. And the word suddhi, by the way, doesn't have to mean like other people are stupid or fools. It just means if you are wizened, meaning if you are ripened, if you have spent enough time here, if you've enjoyed this place to your heart's delight, then come. Let's go home. And if you are this kind of person, one should, one who is wise should, dhyayet pañcākshari suddhi. The wise one should meditate on the 5-syllable mantra. So Lord Shiva has given the way out. It's called the Pañcākshari. But there are a few disclaimers. So here are the 3 disclaimers that we get in the verse. So going back to the verse now. The first thing is this idea. Labdva Shivapada chayam. So this could mean a few things. Chayam can mean shade or shadow or refuge. So having taken, so labdva, remember the labdva, that form is having gained, labdva, having gained the refuge of the feet of the teacher. Shiva here is the teacher, Shiva is the guru. Pada as in pada, maybe, like pada as in step or footstep. So having gained the grace of Lord Shiva's footstep, or having taken refuge at the foot of the guru. So having been initiated. That's one way you can understand this words. Having taken initiation into Shiva Dharma. That's one like prerequisite. But we can read it in many different ways. So what is Shiva Pada actually? Pada, like pada, can mean, and this is very interesting, Pat, Shakti Pat. So I've also heard this commentary. Having received Shiva Pad, Shiva Pat, like Shakti Pata, Shakti Pata means descent of grace. So Shiva Pada means the state of Shiva. Having attained the joy and the soothing quality of Shiva's state means having achieved Shiva's grace, which doesn't necessarily depend on Diksha. In fact, without getting Shiva's grace, you probably won't go for Diksha. You won't be interested in a guru, in a path, in a lineage. You won't be interested in a practice until you first get Shiva's grace. And if you get Shiva's grace, the grace can descend in such a way, making the guru and the path and the practice irrelevant, as Abhinavagupta shows in chapter 2 of his Tantra Loka. So it can be one and done. Like you can get Lord Shiva's grace and immediately become free. That's also possible. And it's particularly argued for in the non-dual traditions. In any case, here, Shiva Pada can just mean Shaktipat, grace, having attained the soothing shade and refuge of Lord Shiva's grace. So that's the way I want to read this phrase. Labdva Shiva Pada Chayam. But I want to read it in another way, if you don't mind. Chaya can also mean to reflect. So having reflected upon the sentences of Lord Shiva. So pada here I'm going to read not as pata, Shaktipat. Shaktipat. I'm not going to read it as Shaktipata, nor am I going to read it as pada, feet, like the guru's feet. And nor even am I going to read it as Shiva's state, because pada can also refer to state. I'm just going to read it as sentence. And by sentence, I mean those sentences that you're looking at right now. Like these are the sentences, Shiva Padas, Lord Shiva's sentences, having reflected upon what Lord Shiva said, or having gained the refuge of the Tantras. So this goes back to the point I was making in the beginning of the lecture, my pitch, like going to the source literature and taking refuge in the fact that there is a friend for you. In this world that can feel so lonely, Lord Shiva has come as a friend in the form of these texts to give you practices. One of the first things my grandfather ever taught me, like I asked him way back when, why are we doing all of this? Like, this is boring. I much rather go out and play. I don't understand how this is actually going to help me in my life. How is it that this is going to free me from suffering? And my grandfather gave the most, practical, grounded response ever. He said, look, at the very least, while you're chanting this text, you're not thinking about your problems. And at least for the 5 minutes that you chant, you'll be free. How beautiful. And so, however bad your life is, your heart is aching, you're feeling lost and alone, you're scared, read the text. And in the text, you find beautiful ideas, philosophies, practices, and you realize you're not alone. Help is there. And that's why you can call this reflecting upon Lord Shiva's words, reflecting upon the Guru's teachings, reading the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, reading the complete works of Swami Vivekananda. You can say it's kind of like taking refuge. You can rest in the cooling shade of the sentences of the books of Shiva, which I'm going to say include the Bible and the Quran, and literally any spiritual book will give you solace. So having attained that solace, meaning practicing a bit of jnana yoga, practicing a bit of study, a bit of self-reflection, etc. I like that reading. So it doesn't necessarily imply the role of a guru, although it can. It doesn't necessarily imply diksha, although it can. It could just imply just taking refuge in the text and reflecting upon the state of Shiva, etc. But I think really prima facie, the impression that most readers are going to get from this line is grace. Having received grace. And there's nothing we can do about grace. Grace either comes or it doesn't. And obviously it's here, because why are we all here in a room for 2 hours talking about this stuff? It's like almost 2.5 hours now. We're giving a complete introduction to Shaivism in theory and practice. Why would we at all be interested in some raving lunatic on the internet, like exhaustively describing Shaivism, unless there's some grace, unless Lord Shiva desires to learn about himself. So we've already received that grace. And for some of us, that experience of grace manifests as seeking out a teacher. And from that teacher, receiving diksha, receiving a mantra, and being part of a lineage and being invited into a practice. So like that's one way to read. Labdva Shivapada Chayam. Swami Vivekananda said, I just want to be in Nirvikalpa Samadhi. Sri Ramakrishna was pissed. He was like, what? I thought you were a great soul, but now I see that you're kind of lame. I thought you were going to be a banyan tree in whose shade many would come for refuge, scorched by this horrid world. But now I see that you're selfish and you just want to be you just want to be free. Isn't it you who sings? And then he quotes a song back at him. And Swamiji is so moved by this and he realizes, like, yeah, I'm not interested in some arhat ship. I don't want my own liberation. I actually want to be this banyan tree. So he goes on to become a Vijnanavadin, like what have you. So here you could say, look at that, the refuge, the shade of the banyan tree that is Vivekananda, the shade of Lord Shiva's sentences, the grace of Lord Shiva's state, Shaktipata. So having attained grace, now you can proceed with the practice. And by the way, you guys, we should already assume grace. Like the only reason we're studying this now is because of Lord Shiva's grace. We already have it. We've already received Lord Shiva's grace, and in a few moments we're going to get from him, from Shiva, Diksha. In other words, he is going to give us a mantra. Shiva alone is the Guru, and the text is living Shiva, Shiva embodied. Okay, that's not the only thing though. Now, the next thing we have to do is we have to abandon all the mirage-like projections of the mind. Tyaktva vritti marichi kam. So giving up all these things in the mind. And so what is that? My hang-ups, I guess you could say. It's like I can't fill the cup if I'm already a full cup. I have to empty the cup. And then the empty cup can receive lessons. But this is also a yogic claim. I'm not going to be meditating if I'm thinking about all these various rays of scattered thoughts. So there's a bit of focus and concentration required. The word tyaktva means it has a connotation of renunciation. So let me just spend some time on this. There is no spirituality without renunciation. At the very least, you have to renounce 2 hours of your day to sit down and practice. At that time, you have renounced all the other things that you could be doing. But if you're attached to all those other things that you could be doing, it's just not going to cut it. You're like not going to come to your mat. And then you will attend a lecture every now and then and complain that you're not feeling it because you're just not putting in the practice. And the reason you're not putting in the practice is because you're attached to all those things that take you away from the practice. So I've seen people in spiritual life for 30, 40 years they've been practicing, but then they get no results. And then when you actually look at what their practice looks like, you see that they have not been practicing. You ask them, how long do you sit there and do your mantra? They say 30 minutes in the morning, 30 minutes in the evening. You could not even learn a language with that amount of investment, right? Like if you spend 30 minutes on Duolingo in the morning, 30 minutes on Duolingo in the evening, it's good that you're consistent at least, but come on. It's going to take you forever to learn Spanish like that. Like you probably won't even learn a musical instrument well enough to be able to jam with others if the only time you ever touch your instrument is 30 minutes in the morning, 30 minutes in the evening. Isn't this like painfully obvious? In this world, when you want to master something, whether it's an instrument or a language or a sport, you have to sacrifice for it. You have to be willing to sit there for 6, 8 hours. Like, see those tennis players, those squash players. I would highly recommend that you watch those like sports movies, like even Whiplash, where the drummer is like pursuing perfection. There's obviously like very abusive patterns in that. And like a quest for excellence can kill you, obviously. But so can this slipshod, lackadaisical attitude. This can kill you worse, I think. This idea that you will never live up to your spiritual potential because you're distracted with all these things that you think are so important, but you will realize at the end of your life mean nothing. And that's the problem. You're just not willing to put in the time because no one has come along and told you that you need to. That you need to do it if you want to realize. And not everyone, but most of us, we're cheating ourselves because we just don't practice enough. Our ancestors, they put in 8-hour days sitting there doing their japa. I know people who sit down for Shiva Ratri at 6 p.m. and get up at 6 a.m. They sit down 6 p.m. for their meditation. Shiva Ratri night goes by, 12 hours go past, and then only they get up and they do their prayers and puja. And I knew a grandmother. She had a shoulder replacement surgery. We drove her home after Kali Puja. It was 3:34 in the morning. When we get back to our house, she, of course, as an Indian lady, wants to host us. So she brings us into her house. She's exhausted, but still she plucks fruit from her mango trees to give to us. She takes us around to see all the saints that are in the room. So touching. And then, as I'm stepping out of the house, I say to her, okay, Ma, time for you to have a well-earned rest. And she goes, Hare, it's time for morning arati. And I'm about to go home and crash out because I'm exhausted as like a 20-something-year-old. And this woman in her 90s, who, by the way, just walked 3 times around Mount Kailash, like this woman is about to go into a room and do morning arati because it's just time. That's just what she does. And she's not going to miss a day. And she hasn't missed a day in like 70 years, maybe, since she got the practice from her guru when she was 20. And then what are we doing? Like, this is the thing, like, we're so entitled, we're so spoiled. McDonald's and our iPhones have ruined us. Like, we think we can get it in a click, in a workshop, in a retreat. Some of us maybe. But this is the great delusion that we buy into, that we think spirituality is easy or that it should be easy. If it were to be so easy, Shiva would cheat himself out of a wonderful adventure, a wonderful Sundance A24 film like struggle for perfection. Please don't cheat yourself. You need hours and hours and hours and hours and hours and hours of practice every single day without missing a single day if you hope to make any progress, any significant progress in spiritual life. Otherwise, it will be cool ideas for the rest of your life and then suffering, you die, and better luck next life. Hopefully next life, somebody will grab you by the shoulders and shake you until you agree to practice as much as you need to practice to be free. I pray that you fall into the clutches of a real guru who will force the medicine down your throat if you refuse to take it. And that's the thing. You need to practice, and you have to practice for hours, and we all need to. We all don't practice enough. So to practice, though, we need this. Tyaktva vritti marichikam. Like, we need to be able to renounce those distractions, those vrittis, those modifications that are like really just not helping us, And I think that comes with discernment, like being able to say, these things are so important to me, or so I think. But when I actually look at what they mean to me, they're not that important. And they won't be when I'm through. Like, they're not things that are fungible in the next life. I'm not going to be able to take these things with me. So why do I waste almost 90% of my day not only doing these things, but thinking about these things? So now, even if I manage to eke out, by grace alone, 30 minutes in the morning and 30 minutes in the evening to sit down and practice, even that is like a victory these days. If we can get any person to just do at least this, it's like pulling teeth to get them to do this twice a day. But if they can even do that, look at what happens. They sit there and for 30 minutes they think about all those things that they spend the other part of their day doing. So you didn't do anything. You sat there for 30 minutes and thought about your day, and then for the 90% of your day you lived your day, and then you came back for 30 minutes and thought about the day. At no point did you actually do your mantra. At no point did you actually practice and become one with Shiva and contemplate. So, tyaktva, you must give up, you must abandon those things which are a distraction to your spiritual life. And that looks like discernment. It looks like thinking about what's really valuable to you. And if this is valuable to you, if you really care about realizing Shiva, which naturally will be the case if you receive his grace, then it makes sense that we should work for it with focus, without distraction. So tyaktva vritti marichikam. So this is twofold. One, we should actually carve out time to be able to do some practice, meaning we have to sacrifice some things which we could otherwise be doing. And secondly, when we practice, and this is why we don't get a lot out of lectures too. Sorry to be harsh, but like, this is where we're coming to the practical stuff, and let me be a little harsh now rather than the world being harsh. And this is the thing. The reason why we don't get a lot out of lectures, when we sit and we listen, we don't really listen. Very few of us are able to listen anymore because we're doing everything else. We're folding laundry, we're doing this, we're doing that. And that's fine. Again, that's perfectly fine. We're just cheating ourselves, though. We're cheating ourselves out of hearing what is really being said. We hear things selectively, and then what we hear, we put together in a kind of mismatch of a teaching, and then we proceed along idiosyncratically. We don't actually hear what our teachers are telling us because we're not really there even to hear it. So when we were learning, I remember it was so important to our gurus that we sat in lotus. And we sat in front of them. And it was so important to our gurus that we took a bath and wore fresh clothes. And we came in the morning and we sat and we chanted Sahana Bhavatu, Sahana Bhunaktu. And absolute focus and attention was required. Otherwise, the guru will just not speak. Why should she waste breath on a person whose mind is too scattered to make any use of the teaching offered anyway? And that's the way this is. People have been listening for years. Very little change happens. Why? Because they haven't been listening for years. Because they've been folding laundry with the lecture on for years. And that's fine. Laundry has to get folded. It's much better to listen to this stuff while you fold your laundry than to fold your laundry and think about other things. Like, that's great. But if we really want to receive something, like to receive a lesson from a teacher, or if we really want to do a practice and chant a mantra, then we shouldn't cheat ourselves. Let's be present for it. and the kind of sacrifice that requires. No, I know. Sometimes like no, that's good too. I don't mean to discourage that. Like there's Shakti. Obviously, like Shakti when it flows, you get this juice. It's like you just took an Adderall or something. Like this spiritual power will move you into action and inspiration. All of that's wonderful and it shouldn't stop, it should continue. But traditionally, though, we would say when doing spiritual practice, when receiving a lesson, no, and that's true. I think that's the thing. They really also emphasize cleanliness, and a lot of these things would be given outdoors, like under the tree. There's a harmony in nature, and in that cleanliness of nature, in that harmony of nature, the teaching can be heard, truly heard. And that's why a bath is so important. Sitting upright in fresh clothes is so important in the Shaiva Siddhanta. All of these purity principles, like it's just so sad that we can, and it's not sad, it's wonderful, it's part of Lord Shiva's story, but it's just so ironic that we could sit in a lecture hall for like 30 years. I know people like this. For 30 years, they've been sitting and hearing and hearing and hearing, nothing to show for it, except maybe that, they could have gotten into trouble with it. Like, it's better than nothing. I hope I can give consolations where consolations are due, but I'm not here to pander and deal pleasantries anymore. Like you could go the next 30, 40 years, and of course there are worse things, just listening but not really hearing, and therefore nothing will happen. And so tyaktva vritti marichakam, if you're serious, give up distractions, not only when you're listening to lectures, not only when you're doing puja, but above all when you're sitting down for your meditation. And like arguably you won't even come to your meditation if you're distracted with other things. So having given up all distractions, we come to our mat and we sit there. Now we have to do this again. Tyaktva vritti marichakam. We did that already to be able to come to the mat. But now that we're on the mat, we must remind ourselves, I'm here to meditate. I'm not here to think about the rest of the day. For the next 30 minutes, and by the way, if we can do even 12 minutes of this, we'll be free. The problem is not that it's not 30 minutes. That people do 6, 8 hours and like, they could have gotten more from like 15 minutes, honestly, of more focused meditation than whatever the fuck they're doing for 8 hours. But if you sit there and you really just like actually give it your all, and that means you have to be very vigilant. The moment the mind moves away from the mantra and moves away from the image, gently, gently, of course, bring the mind back. Now, there are two strategies. Sri Ramakrishna gave two strategies. One is he would sit down to meditate, and then he would imagine that there was a guy standing next to him with a trident. He said he actually saw this. It was his own higher self, like his sankalpa, manifested as an ochre-clad, trident-wielding sannyasin, right? Like who's standing there next to him, wielding the trident, and if he ever got distracted, he was always afraid that the person will whack him with the trident. So it like really kept him straight. He's like, okay, I gotta focus on my Ishta because if I don't, that guy is gonna get me with the trident. That's one strategy, and it's a drastic strategy. And if you're really serious about spiritual life, you wouldn't mind using tactics like this, arguably. You wouldn't be squeamish about this level of vigor because you want what the spiritual life can offer you. So if you're like really serious about music, you might crave a very fierce music teacher to be able to bring you to excellence. So Sri Ramakrishna had this view also from time to time. He would sit and he would hear like locks clicking in his legs, click, 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 like that. And this is because when he went into the temple to meditate, he looked at Shiva sitting in meditation. And looking at Shiva, he said, I should meditate like Shiva meditates. That's how to meditate, actually. And look, he's like a mountain. He barely moves. He's still. Whereas, when we sit, here's what we do. Like, that's cool and all, but it's just not going to cut it. It's vritti marichakam. It's like, and of course, those who are attached to a non-dual view, who are afraid of practice, maybe some of you don't need practice, good for you. But everything I'm saying now will sound horrific to you. You're going to want to run and hide. You don't want to sit there and meditate. And you certainly don't want to be still. And I know you have an answer for me too. Some very clever response about how your consciousness, even though you're moving, consciousness is dynamic. I don't have to sit still because I'm dancing. Okay, you keep your responses. You're right, you win. I concede the debate. Sorry, I'm a fool. I don't know anything. I'm a Shaiva Siddhantin, you guys. I'm a dualist. Oh no, I'm a dualist. I admit it. Like, okay, whatever. Just get out of here with your non-dual arguments, okay? I don't care for them right now. But if you sit there for meditation, like Sri Ramakrishna, resolve to be still. Feel the locks in the joints. He could actually hear this. He was so serious about his practice that when he sat, he actually heard like locks going off in his joints, and he was like fixed in the posture. Click, click, click. He would hear, and he would say, "Only at the end of meditation did the locks release, and I was able to move again." That's how Sri Ramakrishna meditated. And so he would sit there absolutely still for however long. And so I would recommend, like in the beginning, don't set such long periods of time. You might It might backfire, you know? Set small periods, 15 minutes, 10 minutes, maybe even 5 minutes. But for the time that you set, resolve to stay with your eyes closed and still, like Shiva, unmoving until you hear that bell or something, you know? Like it will be excruciating at first. Like if you close your eyes and you put a bell for 5 minutes, you're going to be waiting for that bell, probably, you know? And in the beginning, you might not be meditating, you might just be enduring. You might grit your teeth. I know people who like have thrown up and who have fainted waiting for that 1 hour bell. And you know, I recall those days when I was first getting started, like how 1 hour of sitting still with my eyes closed was horrific. I would get dizzy, I would get nauseous, I would pray for the bell, my legs would ache, and I would want to come out of the pose. And I knew my guru was there watching, so I couldn't. And all the guru bhais are there, so you can't, like, there's a kind of like externally enforced kind of thing, and you're just sitting, sitting, sitting. And the bell goes, you're like, oh my God, God exists. Thank God you take the ski boot off. You're like, oh. That's the revelation, maybe. But now, how much that paid off, you know, just being able to sit there and deal with the discomfort of waiting for the bell that seems like it will never come. It will come unless you forget to charge your phone. Sometimes if you have the bell on your phone and you're sitting there waiting for the bell and you're like, what? And then you open your eyes and you see with horror, that can happen too. So make sure your phone is properly charged. Make sure the volume is up all the way so you can actually hear the bell. And then resolve to sit for however long you set. There's no set time. Nobody can tell you you have to do it for an hour or 30 minutes. But let me at least offer this. However long you decide to meditate, and start small first, resolve to sit there for the whole practice with your eyes closed, staying absolutely still to the best of your ability. I mean, of course, there like sometimes you're gonna have to move, pain, itch, like okay, sure. But the moment you can come back to stillness, try to. As quickly as you can come back to stillness, and as quickly as you can come back to steadiness. Become stireshwara, like Shiva, you know. So tyaktva vritti marichakam, having given up all distractions, come to your practice. And in your practice, having given up all the mirage-like modifications of the mind, stay with the mantra. And not only that, the next thing. So having attained the grace of God, in other words, having taken diksha from a guru, now having renounced all distractions of the mirage-like mind, the third one, and yes, Colinma, it's perfectly fine to sit in a chair because honestly, I think a lot of people want to sit in like a particular pose that they in their mind associate with meditation, but it's counterproductive because they're not able to sit for as long as they would like. I think it's more important to be comfortable with your back straight and be able to maintain that. Excruciating pain is not going to help your meditation. As one great Himalayan sadhu said to me, you know, he said two really funny things to me. One, um, he said, when you sit there like that and you're in pain, you're no longer meditating on God, you're just meditating on your pain. And what you think about, you get more of. So don't be in pain. Like, don't just grit your teeth and like muscle your way through an uncomfortable session. Bring in pillows, sit on chairs, like, do whatever you need to do to be comfortable, but be firm. And you know what? There's a certain point when you just have to be okay with discomfort, but not pain. Like, there's like a kind of reasonable kind of amount of discomfort to expect and an amount that maybe warns you that you should try something different. But make no mistake, it's gonna suck probably. Like it's gonna suck to try to sit still and be quiet with your eyes closed for even 15 minutes. What to say of like an hour, 2 hours, etc. Anyway, so having renounced everything, every distraction, and all the mirage-like modifications of the mind, having attained the grace of the Guru in the form of, having attained the grace of Shiva in the form of Diksha through the Guru, the next thing that we're told in this verse is this. Let me take you back to the verse. And it's this. Chid drishatmani drishtve. And having seen the Lord as one's own self through the means of consciousness. Now, I'm not going to take the next 20 or 30 minutes. I actually did intend to finish it 40 minutes ago, but I'm not going to take the next, like, however long to describe the profound non-dual implication of this particular phrase. I think you can already gather as much, having said the things that we said, that like to see Shiva as the self and the self as consciousness, that's like the first thing that the verse says. And arguably, if you can do that, nothing else matters. Like everything after that phrase won't matter. The reason we're taking this approach is because it's not working. And so a bit of tough love is required, and Shiva will give us that. So now the first part says we should see Lord Shiva as one's own self using the eyes of consciousness. So having seen the Lord as the self in the eyes of consciousness might just mean visualizing Lord Shiva in the heart. So when you say this mantra, which we'll offer in a few moments, when you do your japa practice, try to imagine that Lord Shiva is seated there in your heart. And importantly, look inward as if you're looking at your own essence nature. Don't look and see that Shiva is out there as if he's some other. Here, a dualistic Shaiva Agama is telling us that you are Shiva. And the way to meditate is by focusing on your Shivatva, your Shiva nature, which is always in you as you. And you can visualize him like as Sadashiva or as Bhairava or however you like. Your guru will tell you what to meditate on. Maybe it's Kali or whatever. But when you imagine something, you're using the eye of consciousness. So of course we can read Chit here in this most absolute way, but I'm just going to choose to read it like imagination. The eye of consciousness means just visualize Shiva in your heart. And having seen the Lord in your heart, meaning having established a fixed image of Shiva, abandon all thoughts that are not that. Give up all distractions, all mirage-like modifications of the mind. Stay with that image of Shiva, and then the wise one should contemplate or meditate upon the Pañcākshari, the 5-syllable mantra. So the practice is already so simple. You've received the grace of God, that's why you want to practice, and through that grace you were able to give up all distractions, and now you've come and you're sitting at your mat, and your guru has given the mantra, and that mantra is associated to Shiva, and so visualize Shiva, and with your mind fixed on both the image and the mantra, meditate. Dhyayet. Dhyayet means to meditate. And meditate means to become one with that you are meditating on. So what is to be meditated on? It's the Pañcākshari. So now I come to the kind of closing thing. The mantra must be given. Om. Dhyaye nityam mahesham rajatagirinibham charu chandravatamsam ratnakalpojvalangam parashrimargavarabhiti-hastam prasannam padmasinam samantatstutamamaraganayravakittim vasanam vishwadyam vishwabijam nikhilabhayaharam panchavaktram trinetram. Om, I meditate on Lord Shiva. And now the first Pañcākshara, the first 5-syllable mantra to be given is this one. Om. Once more. Om. Now the 5 syllables of this, what is called Veda Pranava, are the following 5. Prakara, Okara, Makara, Bindu, and Nada. So if we were to draw it, you would see depicted 5 things. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And these 5 correspond to the 5 states respectively. The waking state, the dreaming state, the deep sleep state, the state of Turiya, which in our tradition we say Samadhi, and the state of Turiya Tita, which in some traditions is identified with Turiya also. So there are 4 states, and you are that one beyond all 4, which experiences yourself in all 4. For more on this, study the Mandukya Upanishad. In that Upanishad, we are told that the first syllable, represents Jagrat, the waking state. And in the waking state, you are the waking self experiencing the waking world. Vaishvanara and Virat. Then the U represents the Swapna Avastha, the dream state, in which you, Taijasa, the dreaming self, experiences the Hiranyagarbha, the dream world. And then in deep sleep, you are Pragya, experiencing just Chidghana, just a mass of consciousness called Ishvara. But notice, you are not the waking self nor the waking world, nor are you the dreaming self nor the dreaming world, nor are you even an absence of self in the mass of blissful consciousness. You are that one in which all these 3 shine. So you are Turiya, and that state we say, it's a state, we argue in this tradition, it's Samadhi. Samadhi is neither deep sleep, nor dream, nor waking, yet it is a state in which you abide in your own seeing. It's called Swarupa Avasthanam, the state of your own self. But there is something beyond all four, and that is when you are established in the fourth while in the first, second, and third. So this is called Pranava, the Pranava Shabda, the primordial Om. It is whispered in the left ear usually for many people at the age of 9. They are initiated into Om. So we say further that Nada is space, is reality, and Bindu is the configuration that occurs within that space. These terms can be explored in the Vakya Padiya of Bhatrahari. We don't need to get into that now, but the only thing to understand is that there is a primordial resonance, and that resonance is shaped into specific configurations, which are waking, dreaming, and deep sleep. So thinking of waking, dreaming, and deep sleep as the products, thinking of Bindu as the substance, and thinking of Nada as the space in which those products are formed out of the substance, contemplate Om. Identifying yourself with A, U, Ma, and the silence which contains all three, contemplate Om. So this is the first mantra from Shiva. It's called the Veda Pranava. Pranava means primordial sound, Om. So we'll try it one more time. Contemplating A, U, Ma, Nada, and Bindu. Contemplating also waking, dreaming, deep sleep, Samadhi, and that which is beyond Samadhi, Turiya Tita. Contemplating silence and the sound that resonates in silence. Identifying with Om. Sarvam Omkara Eva. Everything is verily this resonance called Om. And now the next mantra is also called the Pañcākshari, but this mantra is Om, except before you chant Om, you chant a very esoteric, very secret mantra in the Shaiva tradition called the Prasada. It's the Ha sound. Now, Ha represents Visarga. We can get into this a lot, this Ardha Hakala sound. Ha is the breath of Lord Shiva by which the world pours forth. It's Prasara. Prasara means outward flow. And it's Aniruddha, it's unimpeded, the unimpeded flow of Lord Shiva's will, Lord Shiva's ejaculation, both verbally and also sexually. Ha, Visarga. So, Namaha, like that, the Ha sound. Sri Ramakrishna, our Parameshwar Guru, in one place said, Ta, and then Om. He says, I don't actually hear Om, I say, it's Tom. It's more a sound like Tom. There's something before the Om. Interestingly, he said it that way. So similarly, now we're saying it's Ha and then Om. So when you put this together, add the Ha, Hum, Hum, Hum. So Prasada, Ha plus Prakara, Ukara, Makara. Hum. Now, why is this the Pañcākshari? Because Ha plus A plus U plus Ma gives you 4. The fifth is already implied as the silence in which the 4 resonate. So when you chant, contemplate not just the sound, but the spaces between the sounds. Ramana Maharshiji, a great Śaiva Acharya himself, said that it's the space between each repetition of the mantra that can be called japa. So like that, Ha, A, U, Ma. This perhaps is also what Shiva means when he says, Dhyayet Pañcākshari Suddhi. The wise should meditate on the Pañcākshara. But of course now, I must give you the Pañcākshara that everyone, or probably most people, know about. It's so profound. Though it is common, though it is popular, please, I beg of you, do not take it for granted. Do not underestimate this mantra. How could I ever overstate this mantra? How powerful it is, how sacred, and how esoteric it is, even though it's so available. In fact, if I wanted to hide something, if I wanted to make something really secret, I would just put it in plain sight where everyone can see. Then no one will take interest. No one will notice it. The greatest secret that we have to give is right here. It appears in the middle of the Yajur Veda. Now that is not a coincidence. The Yajur Veda might be the source of our entire tradition. Obviously, people say Atharva Veda is more associated with Tantra. We don't need to get into this. Yajur Veda has this Śrī Rudram, arguably one of the most important recitations, most important mantras. And if I was really to do my job, I would insist on your learning it. It's a very powerful thing. It begins with Om Gananaatva Ganapatim Gomavamahe, that verse. But in the middle, right in the middle of this beautiful Śrī Rudram, which we do while we're bathing Lord Shiva in the Rudrabhishekam, there appears this mantra. And it's in the middle for a reason. It like holds everything together. Arguably, like the entire Vedic revelation is hanging on a pin, a kilana. And that kilaka is this Namah Shivaya. So this mantra, which appears in the middle, let's hear it now. Pañcākshari, 5 syllables. Namah Shivaya, Namah Shivaya, Namah Shivaya, Namah Shivaya. Na represents negation. I have negated myself. I don't know that I'm Shiva. And it is my own play, my own sweet will that I should do this. So I say, Na, I am not Shiva. And how do I say this? Through mala, through maya, through the appearance of this other, I come to think that I am different. So ma represents maya, this power of measurement by which I say this is this and that is that. So ma, I am not Shiva because I have projected maya, measuring, mala. Then, as I wander about this mala from life after life after life, I eventually desire Shiva. But why? Because of Shi, that grace that comes. So Shi represents Shaktipata, grace. And what does that grace do? It brings me to a guru. And what does the guru do? Gives va. Va means vak, guru vak. The guru gives the mantra, vak, which is a response to the grace, Shi. And through that vak, the word of the guru, I get yamala. Ya represents yoga, or yamala, union with Shiva. I get sayujya, a moksha. I become one with Shiva through the va, the word of the guru, which I have accessed through my shaktipata, having first negated myself through the world. So see, Namah Shivaya represents your entire journey. It describes Lord Shiva and his play, his vichitra leela, his strange and wondrous play of bondage and freedom. Na, I am not Shiva, because ma, I project this world of maya and measurement, and through that comes Shaktipata, Shi, and through that comes va, the word of the guru, and through that comes yamala, union with Shiva. Na, ma, Shivaya, Namah Shivaya, Namah Shivaya, Namah Shivaya. Another interpretation, na, ma represents na mala, so without impurity, na mala. What is without impurity? Shi, Shiva. And what is Shiva? Shiva swabhavaha iti shakti, says Abhinavagupta. Shiva is va. Va means vamakshi, vamangi, shakti. So va represents Shakti, who is inseparable from Shiva. And what do Shiva and Shakti do? They are in sexual union, yamala. And that yamala is me. I am the product of the union of Shiva and Shakti. So I am the individual, the Nara. So these three, Shiva, Shakti, Nara, these three are pure. They are eternally one. Namala Shiva Vamakshi Yamala. That's what Namah Shivaya also means. Na ma Shivaya. Na mala Shiva Vamakshi and me. And me as the Yamala. It's another meaning. And yet another meaning is the Bhutas, the Panchabhutas. Na to represent earth, Ma to represent water, Shi to represent fire, Va to represent wind or air, and Ya to represent space. As per the Pañcākshara Stotram, Nagendraharaya Trilochanaya, we see that these are elements, and that these elements correspond to the chakras. And so as I chant Na Ma Shivaya, I move through these 5 elements. Namah Shivaya, Namah Shivaya, Namah Shivaya. Notice that in the Namah, there is a Namaha. Namah, Namah, Namah. There is already the prasada embedded in the Namaha. So you can emphasize that if you want. Namaha Shivaya, Om Namaha Shivaya, or just Namah Shivaya. But there's a Ha prasada. Okay, and not just that, the Shi can sometimes be shortened, so you can emphasize the Va. Sometimes Shaktas might do this. They might say Shivaya, to stay with the Va, the Shakti. So Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya. Now, you already received that pranava, that Om. And now here's the Pañcākshari as Namah Shivaya. You can combine them. So the Shatakshari, the 6-syllable mantra, is Om plus Namah Shivaya. Om Namah Shivaya. Om Namah Shivaya. Om Namah Shivaya. Or just Om, or just Home, Home, Home. These are all different forms of the Pañcākshari. Now, one last point here. These 5 syllables correspond to the 5 heads of Lord Shiva. The Tatpurusha, Sadyojata, the Ishana, the Vamadeva, and the Aghora heads. These are all 5 heads from which flow forth the 5 agamas, the 5 streams of agamic revelation. So the cult of Kali from Vamadeva, the cult of Kubjika Mata from Sadyojata, the cult of Trika, Para, Apara from Tatpurusha, and the cult of Lalita Tripura Sundari from Aghora Shiva. And of course, Ishana has a mysterious union of all these. But having said all of that, notice all the goddesses and their various traditions are all brought together in this Namah Shivaya mantra. All the tantras we talked about are all brought together in this Namah Shivaya. All the 5 heads are seen as parts of one reality. Think now of your 5 sense organs. Feel that all 5 feels, gocharas, are all coming together in the chanting of this mantra. Think of your 5 chakras all coming together as you chant this mantra. This is important to notice that these sets of 5s are all reconciled in the one, which is this mantra. Moving on, notice that Shiva has 5 powers. Icha is his willing, which then leads to Jnana, his knowing, and Kriya, his acting. Icha, Jnana, and Kriya are rooted in his Chit Shakti and Ananda Shakti. So this pentad of powers, your own powers, are verily embedded in this mantra. So as you chant it, contemplate Lord Shiva's conscious, blissful, willing, knowing, doing nature, which manifests as your conscious, blissful, willing, knowing, and doing nature. Finally, contemplate his 5 acts. Shiva creates, maintains, destroys, but he also reveals and conceals. Notice how it is consciousness that does all these 3 things. It's in consciousness that things appear, hence creation. It's in consciousness that they stay, hence maintenance. It's in consciousness that they dissolve. And if you know that this is happening, it's revelation. And if you forget that this is happening, it's concealment. Notice the 5 acts of the dancing Shiva, Nataraja, are contained in this mantra. The creation fire, the creation drum, the hand of stasis, the fire of dissolution, the hand hiding the heart, the finger pointing to the foot of the Guru, revelation, concealment, all of that is in the mantra. So as you chant, you can visualize the dancing Shiva, see his images, and see his various hands and feet, and identify those 5 acts with these 5 syllables. Identify the 5 powers with these 5 syllables. The 5 heads of Lord Shiva with these 5 syllables. The 5 elements and the 5 chakras with these 5 syllables. And the last thing I'm going to say now, the last thing, most important thing arguably, identify the entire tradition with these 5 syllables, because we know that way back when, the earliest amongst us, the first few Shaivas, dared to venture into the cremation ground. And what did they bring with them? The 5 mantras of the Taittiriya Aranyaka. The Tatpurusha mantra, Sadyojata mantra, Vama mantra, Aghora mantra, Aghorebhyota, like that. They brought these mantras with them. Ishana mantra. And they went into the smashan. And despite all their difficulties, they practiced with these 5 mantras. And we'll discuss that next week. But those 5 mantras are considered to be the 5 heads of Shiva and the body of Lord Shiva, the essence of our tradition. So in Namah Shivaya, which is from that same Upanishad, it's the same Veda from which comes the Taittiriya Aranyaka, you find the source of Shaivism. And so when you chant this mantra, don't just identify with it, identify with what it represents. And it represents the entirety of the lineage, of the tradition of all those who have come before and given their whole lives to this mantra. So when you chant it, know that your ancestors, in the sense of all the gurus that ever were, are here with you, chanting along with you. As you chant this mantra, know that millions, if not billions of people in the world are chanting it. As you chant it, know it to be the very reverberation of reality. And you're hearing it actually, not even chanting it. So as you chant Namah Shivaya, contemplate all of these things. But by dhyayet, we mean become one with the mantra. So day by day, as you practice this, my prayer for all of you, for us, is that we can lose ourselves in the mantra, so much so that we identify with the mantra and that we become the body of Shiva with its 5 mantras and its 5 heads. Om, may everyone attain to Shiva nature. May all be inspired to practice. May Lord Shiva alone give us Diksha. Om. Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Hari Om Tat Sat. Shri Ramakrishna Arpanam Astu.